The rain in Sector 4 never really washed anything clean. It just rearranged the grime, smearing the neon reflections of the megacity into long, oily streaks across the pavement. Ethan wiped a mixture of hydraulic fluid and rainwater from his forehead, leaving a dark smudge over his eyebrow. He was 25 years old, and he felt twice that age in his knees every time the weather turned like this. He sat on the edge of a rooftop maintenance platform, looking down at the endless river of traffic hovering between the skyscrapers. Above him, the sky was a bruised purple, choked with the heavy smog that the coastal winds failed to push inland. A massive holographic billboard flickered to his left, advertising a new line of synthetic pets that did not require feeding or love. Just a battery charge. Ethan tapped the side of his headset. The chatter of the dispatch line died down, replaced by the drone of the city news feed. The anchor, a woman with skin smoothed to an impossible plastic perfection, was speaking in a tone of practiced concern. Reports of unexplained atmospheric anomalies continue to flood in from the northern hemisphere, she said. Government officials deny any unauthorized airspace incursions. In other news, Helixdyne Security has announced an expansion of their patrol zones in the lower districts to ensure public safety during these uncertain times. Ethan sighed and clicked the feed off. It was always the same noise. Skylights, missing ships, corporate mergers that sounded more like hostile takeovers of the human soul. He picked up his wrench, twisting it idly in his hand. He was a maintenance technician for the municipal grid, which meant he spent his days fixing things that were designed to break so that companies could charge the city to replace them. By night, he pulled shifts as a paramedic, patching up people who had fallen through the cracks of those same broken systems. It was a stable life. It was a boring life. And usually, he was fine with that. But lately, staring out at the horizon where the dark ocean met the dark sky, he felt a hollow ache in his chest, a sensation of waiting for a train that was never going to arrive. He packed his tools into his kit and stood up. The wind whipped his jacket around his lean frame. He needed to get home. Marcus was probably already there, eating his food and talking about the end of the world. Ethan's apartment was a shoebox on the 30th floor of a crumbling residential tower, but it had a window that opened, which was a luxury he paid too much for. When he walked in, the smell of reheated soy noodles hit him. Marcus was sitting on the floor, surrounded by 3 different tablets, all displaying frantic streams of data and blurry photographs. Marcus was a freelance journalist, which in this economy meant he was unemployed and angry. "You are late," Marcus said, not looking up from a grainy video of a blurry triangle in the sky. "Did you see the convoys?" Ethan kicked off his heavy boots and groaned as his spine popped. "I saw traffic," Ethan said. "I saw rain. I saw a busted ventilation unit that refused to cycle. I did not see any secret government convoys." "Marcus?" Marcus spun around, his eyes wide. They moved 3 heavy haulers through the commercial district an hour ago, unmarked. But I tracked the transponder codes. They belong to Helixdyne. They are moving something big. Ethan, something that is not supposed to be here. Ethan grabbed a container of noodles and collapsed onto the sagging couch. Helixdyne owns the power grid, the water filtration, and half the hospitals. Ethan sat around a mouthful of noodles. They move equipment all the time. "Not like this," Marcus insisted. He pulled up a map, stabbing a finger at a location near the docks. "They are fortifying the Oceanic Research Lab. The old one. The one that was supposed to be shut down 10 years ago. Why would they need military-grade perimeter shielding for a defunct marine biology station?" "Maybe they are reopening it," Ethan said, closing his eyes. Maybe they found a new kind of fish. Marcus threw a pillow at him. You are part of the problem, man. You are asleep at the wheel while the sky is falling. I am just tired. Marcus, I just want to pay my rent and maybe meet a girl who does not think the government is reptilian. Marcus snorted. If they are reptilian, at least that explains the cold blood. But seriously, keep your eyes open. The chatter on the deep forums is bad. People are seeing things, lights in the water, shadows in the clouds that do not move with the wind. Ethan rubbed his face. I have a job tomorrow at a Helixdyne subsidiary facility. Actually, not the oceanic one. Just a data processing center downtown. I will look for your lizards. Marcus did not laugh. He just looked at the window, his expression tight. Just be careful. Ethan, the air feels wrong. Can you not feel it? Like the pressure is dropping before a storm. Ethan looked at the window too. The city lights blurred in the rain. Yeah, he lied. I feel it. The facility was sterile, white, and cold enough to preserve meat. It was the kind of place that smelled like ozone and secrets. Ethan had been called in to service the environmental control system on the 42nd floor, which had been fluctuating wildly, freezing out the staff 1 hour and sweating them out the next. He was knee-deep in a floor panel, wrestling with a stubborn servo when he felt eyes on him. It was not the casual glance of a passing security guard. It was a weight, heavy and precise. Ethan sat up, wiping grease on a rag. Standing 3 feet away was a woman. She was wearing a standard white lab coat, but on her, it looked like a tailored uniform. She was striking, with pale skin that seemed to catch the harsh fluorescent light and hold it. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, intricate knot that defied gravity. But it was her eyes that made Ethan pause. They were dark, large, and terrifyingly clear, watching him with the intensity of a hawk watching a field mouse. Can I help you? Ethan asked. She did not blink. You are the technician, she stated. Her voice was melodic but flat, like a beautifully tuned instrument played by a machine. That is me, Ethan said, standing up and brushing off his knees. Ethan, I am just fixing the thermal regulators. I am Lyra, she said. I am an exchange researcher. She extended a hand. Ethan hesitated, looking at his own grease-stained fingers, then wiped his hand vigorously on his pants before taking hers. Her grip was cool and firm, her skin unnaturally smooth. She pumped his hand once, exactly once, then released it and stepped back to a precise distance. Exchange researcher, Ethan repeated. Where are you from? The question seemed to buffer in her mind for a second. A considerable distance away, she said. I am observing the efficiency of local corporate workflows. Right, Ethan said. Well, the workflow right now is that this servo is jammed, and I need to replace the coupler. So, if you do not mind, I shall observe, she said. She did not leave. She stood exactly 1 meter away, watching his hands move. It was unnerving. Most people ignored the maintenance guy. Lyra watched him like he was performing open-heart surgery. After 10 minutes of silence, Ethan felt the need to break the tension. So, do you like the city? He asked, wrenching a bolt loose. It is loud, Lyra said immediately, and the air composition is suboptimal. But the biodiversity is fascinating. Biodiversity? Ethan chuckled. You mean the rats and the pigeons? She tilted her head. And the humans. You vary greatly in size and temperament. It is inefficient but compelling. Ethan laughed. It was a genuine laugh, surprising himself. Inefficient but compelling. I think you just described my entire dating life. Lyra raised her wrist. She wore a sleek, silver device that looked like a bracelet but pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. She tapped it. "Dating life," she repeated softly, as if logging the term. "Is this a reference to courtship rituals?" "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling at her. "You could say that." "I will download you a coffee later," Lyra said suddenly. Ethan paused, the wrench freezing in mid-turn. "You will—" "What?" "Download a coffee," she said, her expression serious. "As a gesture of gratitude for the thermal regulation." "I think you mean you will buy me a coffee," Ethan said gently. "You cannot really download a liquid yet." Lyra blinked. A flush of color, faint and violet-hued, rose on her neck. "Correct. I will purchase a beverage. My grasp of local idioms is still calibrating." "It is okay," Ethan said, charmed despite the weirdness. "I take mine black, no sugar." She nodded once, sharp and military. "Black, no glucose crystals, noted." She turned on her heel and marched away, her movements fluid but oddly devoid of the natural bounce of a human walk. Ethan watched her go, shaking his head. "Socially awkward genius," he muttered to himself. "Definitely Marcus's type." Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan found himself picking up extra shifts at the facility. He told himself it was the overtime pay, but deep down, he knew he was looking for her. Lyra was a puzzle he could not solve, in a world where everyone was glued to their screens, scrolling through feeds of manufactured outrage. Lyra seemed to be vibrating on a different frequency entirely. He saw her in the cafeteria, sitting alone at a corner table. She never had a tray of food. She just sat there with a glass of water, watching the other employees eat. She would study the way they held their forks, the way they laughed, the way they slumped in their chairs. One afternoon, he caught her in the elevator. She was staring at the floor numbers as they lit up, her lips moving silently as if she were counting the milliseconds between floors. "You okay, Lyra?" he asked. She jumped, her shoulders snapping up. "Ethan," she said, exhaling a breath that sounded like a hiss of steam. "I did not sense your approach. I was standing right behind you," he said. "I was distracted," she said. "The vertical velocity of this transport chamber is inconsistent. It varies by 0.04% depending on the load. It is disturbing." "Most people just worry if it gets stuck," Ethan said. He noticed she was holding her side, her hand pressed against her ribs under the lab coat. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said quickly. "Just a minor calibration error. I require nutrients. Do you want half a sandwich? I have got a turkey club in my bag. It is probably 80% real turkey." Lyra looked at the bag with a mixture of curiosity and horror. "I do not consume turkey," she said. "My metabolic requirements are specific. But thank you. That is a kind social gesture." She stepped off the elevator before it had fully stopped, squeezing through the opening doors with a grace that should have been impossible. Later that week, he found her on the roof. It was a break period, and Ethan had gone up to smoke a cigarette, a bad habit he kept hidden from Marcus. The roof was a windswept expanse of gray concrete and ventilation fans, usually empty. Lyra was standing at the very edge, her hands gripping the railing. She was looking up, not at the city skyline, but straight up into the zenith, where the smog was thinnest. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in bruised purples and bloody oranges. "Lyra?" Ethan called out, tossing his unlit cigarette away. She did not turn. "The stars are wrong here," she whispered. Ethan walked up beside her, keeping a respectful distance. He remembered her comment about proxemics. What do you mean? He asked. The atmosphere distorts them, she said, and the light pollution drowns them. It is like being in a box, a very small, dark box. She sounded so lonely, so profoundly isolated, that Ethan felt a physical pang in his chest. He knew that feeling. He felt it every night in his apartment while Marcus ranted about conspiracies. I know it is not much, Ethan said softly. But sometimes, if you go out to the coast, past the sea walls, you can see the belt of Orion. It is pretty clear out there. Lyra turned to look at him. Her eyes seemed to catch the dying light of the sun, swirling with colors that were not quite human. Irises that shifted from hazel to deep violet in the shadows. Orion, she said, testing the word. The hunter. Yeah, Ethan said. We call it the Lost Navigator. She said, or my people do. Where I am from. Where is that again? Ethan asked. Lyra looked back at the sky. Far, she said. Very far. A heavy thrumming sound vibrated through the roof. A Helixdyne security drone, a black wasp the size of a car, rose up from the street level, its scanners sweeping the building. Lyra stiffened. Her body went rigid, her breathing stopping instantly. We should go inside, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Now. She grabbed his sleeve, her fingers digging into the fabric of his jacket with surprising strength, and pulled him toward the stairwell. She moved with the urgency of a prey animal that has scented a predator. What is it? Ethan asked, stumbling to keep up. It is just a patrol drone. It is scanning for biosignatures, she hissed. So, we are allowed to be here. She did not answer. She just dragged him into the stairwell and didn't let go of his arm until they were 3 floors down. When she finally released him, her hand was trembling. I have work to do, she said, not meeting his eyes. Goodbye. Ethan. She vanished into the corridor, leaving him standing there, heart pounding, wondering why a researcher was terrified of a security drone. The inciting incident happened 3 days later. It was the graveyard shift. A massive storm had rolled in off the Pacific, hammering the city with rain that fell like lead shot. The thunder was shaking the foundations of the research facility. Ethan was in the sub-basement, trying to route power around a flooded relay station. He was deep in the bowels of the building, a maze of pipes, conduits, and humming machinery. He turned a corner and nearly ran into Lyra. She was dressed in a dark, form-fitting bodysuit he had never seen before, carrying a satchel that glowed with a soft blue light. Lyra? Ethan said, startled. What are you doing down here? The labs are on 40. She froze, looking like a deer caught in headlights. I was inspecting the structural integrity, she said. The storm vibrations are concerning. In the sub-basement? At 2 in the morning? Before she could answer, the building groaned. A massive boom of thunder cracked directly overhead, and the lights died. Total darkness slammed down on them. The hum of the machinery cut out, replaced by the rushing sound of water in the pipes and the distant wail of wind. Great, Ethan muttered. Primary grid failure. Backup generators should kick in 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. Okay, that is not good, Ethan said. He fumbled for the flashlight on his belt and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating Lyra's face. She looked terrified. Not just nervous, terrified. The security locks will engage, she whispered. The blast doors. Ethan checked his data pad. Dead signal. Yeah, the mag locks on the stairwells default to close during a total power loss. Fire safety protocol. We are trapped in this sector until I can manually override the breakers. Where are the breakers? Lyra asked. stepping closer to him. Ethan shone his light down the hallway. End of the corridor. But the automated fire doors have already dropped. See? A slab of steel blocked the way. We have to use the service shaft, Ethan said. It runs behind the walls. It is going to be tight. I can fit, Lyra said immediately. Ethan pried open a maintenance hatch near the floor. Ladies first, he said. Lyra crawled in without hesitation. Ethan followed, dragging his toolkit. The shaft was a square tunnel of galvanized steel, barely 3 feet wide. It smelled of dust and old grease. Ethan crawled on his hands and knees, the flashlight beam bouncing off Lyra's boots ahead of him. This is highly inefficient architecture, Lyra's voice echoed back to him. Why is there no emergency lighting? Budget cuts. Ethan grunted, scraping his elbow against a bolt. Helixdyne saves money. We crawl in the dark, the circle of life. They crawled for 50 feet until the shaft widened slightly into a junction box, a small cubbyhole where 2 tunnels met. They could sit up here, but only if they pulled their knees to their chests. Ethan sat against one wall, Lyra against the other. Their knees were almost touching. The space was incredibly intimate, a bubble of silence in the chaos of the storm. Ethan set the flashlight on the floor, pointing it up. The light cast long, strange shadows across Lyra's face. So, Ethan said, trying to ignore how good she smelled, like rain and static electricity. Do you come here often? Lyra stared at him, then let out a short, sharp breath. Humor, she said. You use it as a defense mechanism against anxiety. Guilty, Ethan said. It keeps me from screaming. I am slightly claustrophobic. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. The probability of the walls collapsing is low. Ethan, you are safe. I know, he said. It is just the dark. He picked up the flashlight and held it under his chin, distorting his features into a ghastly mask. Ooh, he moaned playfully. I am the ghost of maintenance past. Lyra stared at him for a second, totally baffled. Then, her lips twitched. A small, bubbling sound escaped her throat. It grew into a laugh, a clear, musical sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. That is ridiculous, she said, smiling. Her smile transformed her face, making her look younger, less severe. I got a laugh, Ethan said, grinning. I am putting that on my resume. They sat there for a moment, the silence comfortable now. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. In the dim light, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. It wasn't just her looks. It was the mystery of her, the sense that she was holding the weight of the world on those narrow shoulders. Lyra, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. What are you really doing here? And do not tell me you are studying workflows. Lyra looked down at her hands. She twisted the silver bracelet on her wrist. I am looking for something, she said quietly. Something that was lost. A person? A future, she said. I am trying to see if there is a future here. For you? For everyone. She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes was raw. Ethan, she said, you are a good human. You are kind. He felt a blush heating his neck. I try to be. The air in the shaft seemed to charge with static. The hairs on Ethan's arms stood up. He felt a pull toward her, a magnetic gravity he couldn't explain. He shifted his weight, his boots sliding on the metal floor. The movement knocked the flashlight, sending it spinning. Careful, Lyra said, reaching out to catch it. Ethan reached out at the same time to steady her. His hand shot out, his fingers wrapped around her left wrist. His thumb brushed directly over the silver bracelet, the device she had been twisting. He felt a click beneath his skin, a vibration. Then the world turned white. It wasn't an explosion. It was a silent, blinding surge of light that didn't just hit his eyes, it hit his brain. A shockwave of heat traveled up his arm, slamming into his chest. He gasped, unable to let go. In the flash, Lyra vanished. Or rather, the woman he knew as Lyra vanished. The skin on her arm dissolved into a geometric grid of shimmering light. The disguise melted away like wax under a blowtorch. For one heartbeat, Ethan saw what was beneath. Her skin was not pale. It was translucent and deep, glowing with bioluminescent patterns that swirled like living constellations. Her bone structure was sharper, more elegant, terrifyingly alien. And her eyes were not eyes. They were windows into a void, twin galaxies swirling with nebulae of gold and violet, endless and ancient. And with the sight came the feeling. Ethan's mind was ripped open. He wasn't just seeing her, he was feeling her. A flood of images crashed into his skull. A violet ocean under a double sun, huge crystal spires singing in the wind, a feeling of crushing loneliness, a mission, a fear of the council, a fascination with the way Ethan smiled, a deep, buried longing to be touched. It lasted for a second. It lasted for 1,000 years. Ethan gasped, ripping his hand away as if he had touched a live wire. The light collapsed. The vision snapped shut. Darkness rushed back in, save for the flashlight beam rolling on the floor. Lyra was pressed against the far wall of the shaft, clutching her wrist. She was shaking violently. The human disguise had flickered back into place, but it was unstable. Ripples of light were still shuddering across her neck. "Ethan," she gasped, her voice sounding layered, like two voices speaking at once. Ethan was paralyzed. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stared at her, his breath coming in short, panicked, ragged gasps. He could still see the afterimage of the galaxies in her eyes. He could still feel the alien ocean in his mind. "You," he whispered. "You are." Lyra scrambled backward, her boots scraping loud and harsh on the metal. "Do not speak," she pleaded. "Please, forget you saw it." She fumbled with the panel of the service hatch behind her, kicking it open with panicked strength. "Lyra." "Wait!" Ethan cried out, reaching for her. "Do not touch me," she screamed. It was a sound of pure terror. She threw herself through the hatch, tumbling out into the corridor beyond. Ethan scrambled after her, falling out of the hatch onto the concrete floor. "Lyra." But she was gone. He heard the rapid slap of her boots running toward the emergency stairs, and then the heavy clang of a fire door slamming shut. Ethan sat alone in the dark sub-basement. The storm outside rumbled, muffled and distant. He looked at his hand. His fingers were tingling, a phantom warmth still pulsing where he had touched her wrist. He closed his eyes and the image was there, burned into his retina. The glowing skin, the galactic eyes, the overwhelming sadness of her mind. He scrambled for his pocket, pulling out his communicator with trembling fingers. He dialed Marcus. "Pick up, pick up, pick up." "Ethan?" Marcus's voice was groggy. "It is 3 a.m. Did the lizards get you?" Ethan stared into the darkness, his reality fracturing around him. "Marcus," he whispered, his voice shaking so hard he could barely form the words. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his tone sharpening. "Ethan, are you hurt?" "No," Ethan stammered. I know the truth." "What truth?" "About Lyra," Ethan said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. She was hiding that she was alien, until I touched her. The fluorescent lights overhead slammed back into existence with a sound like a cracking whip. One moment. Ethan was kneeling in the suffocating darkness of the maintenance shaft, his mind still reeling from a vision of impossible galaxies and violet oceans. The next, the world was blindingly white, sterile, and terrifyingly ordinary. The hum of the facility's ventilation system groaned back to life, vibrating through the metal floor beneath his knees. He blinked, shielding his eyes, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Lyra was pressed against the opposite wall of the cramped shaft. The luminous, shifting geometry of her skin was gone. The star fields that had swirled in her eyes had vanished, replaced by the dark, panicked irises of a human woman. But the transition had not been smooth. She was trembling violently, her chest heaving as if she had just sprinted a mile. Her skin looked pale and waxy. And for a split second, Ethan saw a ripple like a glitch in a video feed shudder across her left cheek before smoothing out. "You," Ethan whispered, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling. "What was that? What are you?" Lyra recoiled, scrambling backward on her hands and heels. Her boots struck the metal grating with a harsh clang. "Do not touch me," she shouted. The fear in her voice was raw and human, but it hit Ethan with a physical force that had nothing to do with sound. He felt a sharp spike of terror in his own chest, a cold needle of panic that did not belong to him. He gasped, clutching his sternum. I am not," Lyra stammered. She looked at her wrist, tapping frantically on the silver bracelet. Her disguise shimmered, locking back into place with a subtle auditory hum that only Ethan seemed to hear. "Static discharge," she said. Her voice was shaking, but it was hardening, layering over with that frosty, clinical tone she always used. It was a hallucination caused by high-voltage arcing in the confined space, oxygen deprivation. You saw nothing. "I saw galaxies," Ethan said. He struggled to his feet, hitting his shoulder against the low ceiling of the shaft. "I saw the ocean. I felt you. You are confused," Lyra snapped. She was already moving, shoving herself backward through the open hatch and out into the corridor. "The sensory deprivation of the darkness caused a neural misfire in your cortex. Go to the infirmary. Ethan, get a scan." She tumbled out of the hatch and scrambled to her feet. Ethan followed, falling out onto the linoleum floor of the sub-basement corridor. "Lyra!" he called out. She did not look back. She broke into a run, her lab coat flapping behind her like a broken wing. She moved with a speed that was just on the edge of impossible, rounding the corner and vanishing into the restricted sector before Ethan could even get his legs under him. Ethan was left alone in the humming corridor. He looked at his hand, the one that had touched her wrist. It was trembling. He could still feel the phantom warmth of her skin, but deeper than that, he could feel a dull, throbbing ache in the back of his mind. It felt like a radio left on in an empty room, a low-level static that buzzed with an emotion he could not name. He leaned against the wall and slid down until he hit the floor. She was hiding that she was alien, he whispered to the empty air. "Until I touched her." The next 3 days were a blur of fractured reality. Ethan tried to go back to his life. He tried to wake up, drink his coffee, put on his uniform, and go to work as if the universe had not just cracked open and shown him its guts. But the crack would not seal. It started with the dreams. Ethan had never been a vivid dreamer. Usually he slept the dead, dreamless sleep of the exhausted working class. But now, the moment his eyes closed, he was adrift. He floated in a sky that was not black, but a deep, bruising purple. He saw cities grown from living crystal that hummed with a song he could almost understand. He felt the crushing weight of 2 suns beating down on his skin. burning him with a heat that was both terrible and loving. And he felt lonely. It was a loneliness so profound, so ancient, that it made his bones ache. It was not the loneliness of a guy in a small apartment who could not get a date. It was the loneliness of a castaway looking at a horizon that never ended, knowing that everyone he loved was light years away. He would wake up gasping, his sheets soaked in sweat, clutching his chest. And it did not stop when he was awake. He would be sitting in his living room, listening to Marcus rant about the news, and suddenly he would smell ozone and exotic spices. He would be working on a junction box on the 12th floor, and he would feel a sudden sharp spike of anxiety that made him drop his screwdriver, only to look out the window and see a Helix Dine security convoy passing on the street below. It was like he was haunted, but not by a ghost, by her. He was sitting at the small kitchen table, staring into a cup of black coffee, when Marcus slammed a data pad down in front of him. "Are you listening to me?" Marcus demanded. Ethan blinked, the image of the purple sky fading from his mind's eye. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Yeah. I am listening. Convoys. Lizards. The usual." "This is not the usual." "Ethan!" Marcus yelled, pacing the small room. "Look at the feed." Ethan looked at the screen. A news anchor with a grim expression was standing in front of the Capitol building. The text crawl at the bottom read, "Classified orbital project leak confirmed. Citizen unrest grows. Sources indicate that the increased Helix Dine security presence is linked to an undisclosed asset recovery operation," the anchor said. While government officials maintain that the atmospheric anomalies are weather balloons, leaked documents suggest a joint operation involving off-world biological material. "Off-world biological material," Marcus whispered. "Do you know what that means? It means they found something, or someone. And look at the streets. Ethan." Marcus swiped to a live feed of the city center. Armored personnel carriers with the Helix Dine logo, a double helix wrapped around a sword, were blocking the major intersections. Drones hovered in swarms, their red scanning lasers painting the crowds. "They are looking for something specific," Marcus said. "They have authorized Level 4 scanning protocols. That means they are scanning DNA signatures at a distance. They are hunting. Ethan." Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. A sudden wave of nausea washed over him, not his nausea, but a sharp, sickening lurch of fear that hit him from nowhere. "She is scared," Ethan realized. The thought was not a guess, it was a fact, as solid as the table under his hands. He could feel her fear vibrating in his teeth. "I have to go to work," Ethan said, standing up abruptly. "Work?" Marcus stared at him. "Did you not see the tanks on the street? You should call in sick. We should bunker down." "I have to go," Ethan said, grabbing his jacket. "I left a calibration running." He ran out of the apartment before Marcus could argue. He did not take the bus. He ran the 6 blocks to the transit station, his heart pounding in time with the pulses of fear he was receiving from a woman he barely knew. Lyra stood in the center of her quarters, a small, windowless room deep within the secure residential wing of the facility. The room was dark, lit only by the shimmering blue hologram floating in the center of the air. The figure in the hologram was tall, draped in robes of shifting shadow. Its face was obscured by a digital mask, but the voice that emanated from the speakers was cold, sharp, and imperious. "Report," the voice commanded. Lyra stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back. She had removed her lab coat. Underneath, she wore a simple gray tunic. Her disguise was active, but she felt the strain of it, the constant energy drain of maintaining the illusion of humanity. "The anomaly has been contained," Lyra said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling behind her back. The subject, Ethan Vance, was exposed to a momentary visual distortion due to the power failure. I have assessed the probability of him understanding what he saw. It is low. He believes it was a hallucination. Do not lie to the High Council, Lyra, the voice cut in. It was a sound like grinding metal. Lyra flinched. Our sensors detected the biometric surge. The voice continued. You made physical contact, skin to skin, and not just contact. You initiated a neural handshake. It was accidental, Lyra said quickly, stepping forward. The containment field on my wrist unit was damaged by the electromagnetic pulse of the storm. He reached out to steady me. It was a reflexive action. It lasted less than a second. And in that second, you compromised the entire mission, the voice hissed. You opened a two-way channel with a human. Do you have any idea of the contamination risks? Do you know what House Kethar will do if they find out we have bonded with the livestock? I have not bonded, Lyra lied. The link is weak. It is fading. It does not matter, the voice said. He is a loose end that has seen your true face. Helix Dine has accelerated their timeline. They know we are here. Lyra, they are sweeping the city. If they capture this human and extract his memories, they will have proof of our presence before the assembly vote. I can handle him, Lyra said. I will monitor him. If he shows signs of... No, the voice ordered. You will not monitor him. You will erase him. Lyra went cold. The room seemed to tilt. Erase him? She whispered. You have a memory dampener in your kit, the voice said. It is designed for localized synaptic purging. Find him. Use it. It will liquefy his frontal cortex. He will not remember you. He will not remember his own name. He will be a vegetable, but the mission will be safe. That is murder, Lyra said. It is pruning, the voice corrected. Or if you lack the stomach for technology, arrange an accident, a fall down a shaft, an electrocution. These humans are fragile creatures. They break so easily. Lyra felt a wave of nausea. I was sent here to observe, she said, to judge if they were worthy of contact, to see if they had potential. How can we judge them if we act like monsters? We are not monsters. Lyra, we are gardeners. And sometimes, you must cut out the rot to save the tree. You have 12 hours. If the human is still a liability by the next orbital pass, we will extract you and incinerate the facility to cover our tracks. Do not fail us again. The hologram flickered and died, plunging the room back into darkness. Lyra stood there, shaking. She looked down at her hands. They looked human, but she knew what lay beneath. She had been trained in combat, in espionage, in the high politics of the Galactic Assembly. She had killed in self-defense before. But Ethan? She thought of the way he had looked at her in the shaft, not with hatred, with wonder. She thought of the clumsy way he had tried to make her laugh with the flashlight, the ghost of maintenance past. She sank onto her narrow bed, burying her face in her hands. The link in her mind throbbed, and for the first time, she did not try to block it. She felt him coming. He was close. He was coming for her. Ethan moved through the facility like a ghost. He knew the service corridors better than the architects did. He bypassed the security checkpoints, slipping through ventilation ducts and service elevators, guided by a sensation that was stronger than a GPS signal. It was a pressure in the center of his forehead. When he went the wrong way, the pressure faded. When he went the right way, it intensified, warming his blood. He found her on the 42nd floor in a dead-end corridor near the server banks. It was a quiet spot, drowned in the hum of the cooling fans. She was standing by the window, looking out at the smog-choked city. She did not turn when he opened the door. "Go away. Ethan," she said. Her voice was tired. Ethan closed the door and locked it. "No," he said. He walked toward her. The air between them felt thick, charged with static electricity. Every step was an effort, like walking through water. "I know you are in there," Ethan said to her back. "I know this face is just a mask." Lyra turned around slowly. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, human circles, or a very good imitation of them. "You are trespassing in a restricted zone," she said. "I can call security. They will arrest you." "No, you won't," Ethan said. "Because if security comes, they will scan you. And I do not think you want that." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You are playing a dangerous game, technician. You do not know what I am. You do not know what I can do to you." "I know you are scared," Ethan said. The words hung in the air. Lyra flinched as if he had slapped her. "I am not scared," she said coldly. "Yes, you are," Ethan said, taking another step. "I can feel it. I have been feeling it for 3 days. I feel your fear when the drones fly over. I feel your loneliness when you look at the sky. I feel it right now." "Lyra, you are terrified. Stop it," she whispered. He was 5 feet away now. He could see the pulse jumping in her throat. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Just tell me I am not crazy. Tell me I saw what I saw." Lyra closed her eyes. She took a shuddering breath. The air in the corridor seemed to warp around her. "You want the truth?" she asked, her voice trembling with suppressed energy. "You want to know what you saw?" She opened her eyes. This time, she did not drop the disguise completely, and she just let it slip. Her eyes flared. The whites vanished, consumed by the swirling darkness of the cosmos. The violet nebulae spun in her irises. Her skin didn't change, but a faint, ethereal glow began to radiate from her pores, casting a strange underwater light on the walls. Ethan gasped, but he did not step back. "I am not from here," Lyra said, her voice resonating with a harmonic overtone. "I am a xenological observer, 3rd class, of the House Solari. My home is 50 light years from this rock. And you have compromised everything." She slumped against the window, the glow fading as she fought to regain control. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Ethan rushed forward and knelt beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "Hey, breathe." "I am trying." She gasped. "Being near you, though, it makes it hard to stabilize. The link, it is a feedback loop." "Link?" Ethan asked. He sat down, crossing his legs, sitting close enough that his knee almost brushed hers. "When you touched my wrist unit," Lyra said, looking at the floor, "you completed a circuit. My disguise generator uses a neurosynaptic interface. It connects to my nervous system. When you touched it during the surge, your bioelectricity merged with mine." "Merged?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Like, permanently?" "It is rare," Lyra said, "even among my people. It is called a sharika, a soul bridge. It is supposed to happen between mates, between life partners, not by accident in a ventilation shaft with a human maintenance worker." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "So, we are married." Lyra let out a short, hysterical laugh. "No, it is not legal. It is biological. It means our neural pathways have entangled. I can feel your emotions. You can feel mine. If we were fully open, we could share memories, thoughts." She looked up at him, her alien eyes swirling. "I was ordered to erase your memory." "Ethan." Ethan went still. "To erase me, to wipe the encounter from your mind. But the device, it would destroy your personality. You would be empty. She looked at her hands. I could not do it. Ethan looked at her. He saw the terror in her face, the immense weight of the choice she had made. She had defied her people to save his mind. Thank you, he said softly, for not turning me into a vegetable. Lyra looked at him, searching his face. You are not afraid? You know I am an alien, a monster. I saw the galaxies, Ethan said. It was beautiful. Lyra's breath hitched. She stared at him, and for a moment, the barrier between them dissolved. Let me show you, she whispered, not the scary part, the real part. She raised her hand slowly. Ethan didn't flinch. She placed her palm gently on his forehead. Her skin was cool, vibrating with a subtle energy. Close your eyes, she said. Ethan closed his eyes. The world fell away. The smell of ozone and old carpet vanished. He was standing on a cliff of white obsidian. Below him, an ocean of violet water stretched to the horizon, rolling in slow, majestic waves. The sky was a kaleidoscope of aurora borealis, shifting from emerald to gold. He saw cities that looked like they had been grown, not built. Spires of translucent crystal spiraled up toward the moons, pulsing with inner light. He felt the wind, and it smelled of spices he couldn't name, cinnamon and ozone and petrichor. But more than the sights, he felt the feeling. He felt a profound sense of duty, a weight of expectation. He felt the pressure of being a daughter of a high house, the fear of failing her mother, the crushing loneliness of being sent to a mud-ball planet to watch primitive monkeys kill each other. And he felt a small, secret flame, a curiosity, a fascination with the way the humans laughed, the way they loved so recklessly, the way Ethan had made a ghost face with a flashlight just to make her smile. The vision faded. Ethan opened his eyes. He was back in the corridor, gasping for air. Lyra had pulled her hand away, but she was leaning forward, her face inches from his. That is home, she whispered. It is amazing. Ethan breathed. He looked at her, and he didn't see the alien anymore. He didn't see the researcher. He saw her. He felt a rush of heat in his chest, a sudden, overpowering attraction that had nothing to do with logic. He wanted to hold her. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to kiss her. The thought hit Lyra like a physical blow. She gasped, her eyes widening. Her skin suddenly flushed a deep, luminous indigo, a blush that went all the way down her neck. She scrambled back, hitting the wall. "Ethan!" she yelped. "What?" Ethan said, startled. "What happened? Your hormone levels?" Lyra stammered. She was breathing fast, her hand pressed to her chest. "Your dopamine and oxytocin just spiked by 400%. "Oh," Ethan said, his face turning bright red. "You can feel that?" "I can feel everything." She squeaked. "It is intense. It is very loud. Is that how humans always feel? It is chaotic. It is overwhelming." She looked terrified, but not in a bad way. She looked like someone who had just looked into the sun. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to wrestle his thoughts into submission. "Sorry," he said. I guess I really like the ocean." Lyra looked at him, her indigo blush slowly fading. She tilted her head. "It was not just the ocean," she said softly. "You desired physical proximity." "Okay, yes," Ethan admitted, rubbing his face. "Look, this is weird for me too. I am sitting in a hallway with a woman who can read my mind and knows exactly how much I want to hold her hand." "Hold her hand," Lyra repeated. She sounded skeptical. "That was not the primary image in your cortex." Ethan groaned. "Please stop analyzing my cortex. It is embarrassing. Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile touched her lips. It wasn't the polite smile of the researcher, it was a real amused smile, Ethan stammered, trying to deflect. Do you guys, date on your planet? Or is it all just neural handshakes and crystal spires? Lyra laughed. It was a nervous sound, but genuine. We have courtship rituals, she said, regaining some of her composure. They are complex. They involve negotiations between houses, genetic compatibility screenings, and a minimum of 3 years of probationary intellectual exchange. Ethan stared at her. 3 years of talking? Before you can hold hands? Before we can initiate a biometric merge? Yes. Ethan shook his head. That sounds terrible. No offense. Here. We usually just go for coffee and see if we can stand each other for an hour. Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft. I think I would prefer the coffee, she said quietly. The air between them changed again. The fear was gone, replaced by a warm, golden tension. Ethan leaned in slightly. Lyra didn't pull away. She leaned in too, drawn by the gravity of the link. For a moment, they were just a boy and a girl sitting on a dirty floor about to cross a line that spanned galaxies. Then the world turned red. A siren blared, a harsh rhythmic wail that cut through the silence like a saw. The lights in the corridor strobed red. Alert! Alert! Unauthorized biosignature detected in Sector 4. Security teams deployed. Lyra jumped to her feet, her face losing all color. They are here, she whispered. Who? Helixstein. My people. Everyone. She grabbed her wrist unit and tapped a sequence. A holographic map sprang up. They have surrounded the building. They are scanning floor by floor. They have tuned the sensors to my frequency. She looked at Ethan. Her eyes were wide with panic. You have to go, she said, pushing him toward the door. Go to the fire escape. If you leave now, you can blend in with the evacuating staff. They will not stop you. What about you? Ethan asked, grabbing her arm. I have to surrender. If I surrender, they might not purge the facility. No, Ethan said firmly. If you surrender, they will cut you open. You said it yourself. They are hunting. Ethan, please, Lyra cried, tears welling in her alien eyes. I cannot let you get hurt. You are just a human. This is not your fight. Ethan looked at the red lights flashing on the walls. He heard the heavy tramp of boots echoing from the stairwell. He heard the mechanical whine of heavy weaponry charging up. He looked at Lyra. He felt her terror, but beneath it, he felt her desperate, jagged love for a world she was supposed to be judging. He grabbed her hand, his fingers interlaced with hers. The link flared, hot and bright, a shield against the fear. I am not leaving you to get dissected, okay? Ethan said, his voice fierce. That is my line. Lyra stared at him. She felt his resolve through the link, stubborn, reckless, and immovable. The boots were getting closer. She tightened her grip on his hand. If they find us together, you will disappear, she said, her voice low and urgent. There is no coming back from this. Run with me now, or go back to your small life and forget me. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled her toward the service elevator. Run, he said. Lyra sprinted with him, and together they plunged into the darkness of the shaft. Just as the blast doors behind them blew open in a shower of sparks. The blast doors shuddered, metal groaning against metal as the hydraulic seals began to disengage. Sparks showered down from the ceiling like angry fireflies, sizzling on the polished floor. Ethan stood at the threshold of the service elevator, his hand gripping the rubber safety rail so hard his knuckles had turned white. The alarm was a physical weight in the air, a pulsing red scream that vibrated in his teeth. He looked at Lyra. She was poised to run, her body angled away from him, her eyes darting between the widening gap in the blast doors and the dark, open mouth of the elevator shaft behind them. She had given him an out, a chance to be small, a chance to go back to his apartment, eat cold noodles, and watch the world end on television. Ethan looked at the terrifyingly beautiful woman trembling in her oversized lab coat. He felt the phantom pressure in his mind, the ghost of a violet ocean that wasn't his. And he realized with a sinking sensation that his apartment was never going to feel like home again. "I am not leaving you to get dissected, okay?" Ethan said, his voice cracking over the siren's wail. "That is my line." Lyra froze. She turned back to him, her eyes wide, the swirling galaxies hidden behind her human contact lenses momentarily stunned into stillness. She opened her mouth to argue, to cite probability tables and survival rates, but a wave of sharp, agonizing hope hit Ethan through the link. It was so intense it made his breath hitch. She wanted him to stay. She was terrified he would, and desperate that he would not leave. "Incoming!" Ethan yelled, grabbing her arm and yanking her into the elevator car just as the blast doors hissed open. A squad of Helix Dine security troopers in matte black armor stormed the corridor, their weapons raised. Beams of coherent light sliced through the air where Lyra had been standing a second before, scorching the wall. Ethan slammed his fist onto the manual override button. The heavy grate of the elevator crashed down, and the car dropped like a stone. Gravity lurched into his stomach. Lyra stumbled, falling against him, and for a second, he was holding her, her body rigid and vibrating with adrenaline. "We cannot go to the lobby," Ethan shouted over the roar of the wind in the shaft. "They will have the exits blocked. We must go lower," Lyra said, her voice tight. "Beneath the foundation." "This is the sub-basement," Ethan yelled back. "There is nothing lower except dirt and worms." "There is infrastructure," Lyra corrected, pulling away from him to tap frantically on her wrist unit. "My scans indicate a network of hollow cavities dating back to the pre-unification era." "A transit system?" "The old subway," Ethan realized. "It was condemned 50 years ago. It is a maze. Lyra, it is full of rats and methane. It is also devoid of surveillance," she countered. The elevator shuddered to a halt at the bottom of the shaft. The doors did not open, they were jammed shut by centuries of rust and neglect. Ethan didn't hesitate. He kicked the emergency hatch in the floor of the car. It gave way with a screech of tearing metal. "Ladies first," he grunted, gesturing to the dark hole that smelled of stagnant water and rust. Lyra looked at the hole, then at him. "Your chivalry is misplaced, but I accept the tactical advantage," she said, and dropped through the opening. They landed in a crawl space filled with thick, insulated cables. Above them, they could hear the whine of cutting lasers working on the elevator doors. "Move," Ethan whispered. They scrambled through the crawl space, emerging into a vast, echoing tunnel. The air was cold and damp, thick with the smell of mold. The only light came from the faint bioluminescent glow of Lyra's wrist unit and the dying beam of Ethan's flashlight. They ran. It was a nightmare sprint through the intestines of the city. Ethan led the way, his brain accessing a mental map of maintenance schematics he hadn't looked at in years. They splashed through ankle-deep water, climbed over piles of collapsed concrete, and squeezed through rusted service gates. But Helix Dine was not giving up. A low, buzzing sound began to echo off the curved walls behind them. "Seeker drones," Lyra hissed, stopping dead. "They are tracking our thermal signatures." Ethan looked around frantically. The tunnel was a straight shot for another 100 yards. There was nowhere to hide. "Can you jam them?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. "My equipment is for observation, not combat. If I use an electromagnetic pulse, I will fry the local grid and bring the ceiling down on us." She looked at the approaching darkness, where 3 red eyes were bobbing in the air, moving faster than a sprinting man. "I can bend the light," she said, "but it is unstable. You must stay close to me, physically connected." "How close?" Lyra grabbed his hand and yanked him against her side. She wrapped her arm around his waist, her body pressing tight against his. "Do not let go," she commanded. She tapped her wrist unit. A bubble of distortion rippled out from her skin. To Ethan, the world suddenly looked like he was viewing it through a fisheye lens, colors smeared, and the edges of his vision turned gray. The drones buzzed closer. They were sleek, black machines shaped like wasps, their sensor arrays spinning hungry red light over the tunnel walls. Ethan held his breath. He could feel Lyra's heart hammering against his ribs. The heat of her body was incredible, radiating through her damp clothes. The drones slowed down. The red light swept over them. Ethan flinched instinctively, but the light passed right through them as if they were made of glass. "They cannot see us," Lyra whispered in his mind. The thought was clear as a bell, bypassing his ears entirely. "I am bending the photon stream around our biomass." "It tickles," Ethan thought back, unable to stop himself. He felt a flare of amusement from her, a quick, bright spark in the darkness. "Focus, Ethan." They walked slowly, matched step for step, moving past the hovering drones. The machines hovered, confused, their sensors clicking as they searched for the prey that had just vanished. Once they were clear, Lyra dropped the field. She sagged against him, her face pale. "That consumes a significant amount of energy." She gasped. Ethan kept his arm around her, supporting her weight. "You are doing great," he said. "Just a little further. I know a junction up ahead that connects to the storm drains." "This is way above my pay grade," Ethan muttered as he kicked open a rusted grate. "I fix air conditioners. I do not outrun killer robots." "I can authorize a credit transfer to your account," Lyra said, her voice deadpan as she climbed through the grate. "What is the standard hazard pay for fugitive assistance?" Ethan laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. That was a joke. Lyra, sarcasm. "Oh," she said, pausing on the other side. "I am updating my file. Sarcasm in the face of death, a curious human coping mechanism." "It keeps us from crying," Ethan said, squeezing through after her. They kept moving deeper into the dark. The banter, as awkward as it was, became a lifeline. It was a way to remind themselves that they were still people, not just targets. After what felt like hours, they reached a section of the subway that looked different. The debris had been cleared away. The rusted tracks were shined, and on the wall, painted in ultraviolet pigment that only Lyra could see, and Ethan, through the link, could sense, was a symbol, a circle with a triangle inside it. "We are here," Lyra said. She approached a blank concrete wall and tapped a rhythmic pattern on the stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding rumble, a section of the wall slid inward. A shotgun barrel poked out. "Identify!" a gravelly voice growled from the darkness. Lyra straightened her spine, summoning a reserve of dignity that made her look 6 inches taller. "I am Lyra of House Solari. I invoke the right of sanctuary, and I brought a guest." The shotgun lowered. A face appeared in the gap, craggy, lined, and human, with a thick gray beard and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and decided none of it was impressive. "You brought a heavy tale." "Princess," the man grunted. "Get in before the drones pick up the heat from that open door." They hurried inside, and the wall ground shut behind them, sealing out the damp and the dark. The safe house was a miracle of improvisation. It was built into a forgotten station platform, a wide space filled with mismatched furniture, scavenging tech, and the smell of frying onions. Wires draped from the ceiling like vines, powering banks of monitors that glowed with encrypted data streams. There were about a dozen people inside. Some looked human, some did not. Ethan saw a figure in the corner with blue skin and gills, reading a paperback book. He saw a small, furry creature dismantling a toaster with 4 hands. The man with the shotgun spat on the floor. "Name is Drix," he said. "I run this hole. You two look like you went swimming in a sewer." "Maintenance tunnels," Ethan corrected, wiping grime from his face. "It is mostly rust water." Drix grunted. He looked at Lyra. "We heard the chatter," he said. "Helixdyne has gone full aggressive. They have locked down Sector 4. They are saying terrorists seized the facility." "Terrorists," Ethan snorted. "2 people in wet clothes. Terrorists work for the narrative," Drix said. "Sit down. Eat." He pointed to a table where a pot of something stew-like was steaming. Ethan realized he was starving. He pulled out a chair for Lyra, then collapsed into one himself. As they ate, the stew was surprisingly good, spicy and rich. Drix sat across from them, cleaning his shotgun. "You kicked the hornet's nest," Drix said, "but you do not know the half of it. It is not just Helixdyne." "I know about House Kethar," Lyra said quietly. Drix laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Kethar. They are just the muscle. This is a joint operation. Helixdyne gets the tech. Kethar gets the planet." "What do you mean, gets the planet?" Ethan asked, the spoon freezing halfway to his mouth. Drix leaned forward. "The Galactic Assembly has rules, kid. They cannot just invade a sovereign world. It is bad PR. But if a world is deemed unstable or dangerous to the galactic community, they can assign a caretaker, a warden." "Protective supervision," Lyra whispered, her face ashen. "Exactly," Drix said. "Helixdyne is paid to stage a disaster, a biological attack, a nuke in a major city, something that makes humanity look like rabid dogs that need a leash. Then House Kethar steps in, generously, offering to manage Earth's security. They get the resources, the labor, the genetic stock, and humanity thinks they are being saved." Ethan felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. "That is slavery," he said. "It is politics," Drix corrected. "Same thing, different paperwork." Lyra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the concrete. "I have to stop them," she said. "I am the observer. My report determines the vote." "Your report?" Drix scoffed. "Princess, your report was rewritten 3 days ago. Your handler sold you out." Lyra went still. "That is impossible," she said. "Is it?" Drix asked. "Why do you think Helixdyne knew exactly where you were? Why do you think your extraction beacon is offline? You are not the judge anymore. You are the loose end." Lyra stared at him, her defenses crumbling. She looked small, lost, and devastatingly young. Ethan stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. He felt her trembling. "We need a minute," Ethan said to Drix. "Is there somewhere private?" Drix nodded toward a heavy steel door at the back of the platform. "Storage room. Do not touch the ammo crates, and try not to bleed on anything." Ethan guided Lyra into the back room. It was small, piled high with boxes, lit by a single flickering bulb. He closed the door, shutting out the noise of the safe house. Lyra sank onto a stack of crates, burying her face in her hands. "I am so stupid," she whispered. "I thought I was being neutral. I thought I was doing my duty. I am the daughter of the matriarch." I was supposed to be better than this. Ethan sat beside her. You are the daughter of the matriarch, he asked softly. Lyra looked up, tears streaking her dirty face. Yes. My mother leads House Solari. We are supposed to be the diplomats, the peacekeepers. If I fail, it destroys her coalition. It hands power to the warmongers. She looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with a sudden, desperate resolve. I have to protect you, she said. You are doing a pretty good job so far, Ethan said, trying to smile. No, Lyra said. She reached out, her hands framing his face. Her palms were cool, her thumbs brushing his cheekbones. The link. Ethan. It is a beacon. As long as we are connected, they can find us. And worse, if I get caught, if they interrogate me, they will burn through my mind to get to yours. You will feel everything they do to me. Ethan flinched at the thought, but he didn't pull away. So what do we do? I have to break it, Lyra said. I have to sever the link. Will it hurt? Yes. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. Close your eyes, she whispered. Focus on your own heartbeat. Push me out. Ethan closed his eyes. He felt her breath on his lips, then he felt the static charge of her skin. And then he felt her mind, an immense crystalline presence, pushing against his. It was not violent. It was a gentle, firm pressure, like a wall being built brick by brick. He felt her trying to withdraw, to pull her emotions, her memories, her very self out of his head. But as she pulled, Ethan felt a panic rise up in him, a primal refusal. His mind didn't want to let go. He reached back instinctively, his thoughts tangling with hers like roots in deep soil. No, he thought. Do not go. I have to. Her voice echoed in his skull. Let me go. Ethan, I can't. They sat there, locked in a silent struggle. The air in the room grew heavy and hot. The single light bulb flickered. Their breathing synced. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The wall Lyra was building crumbled. The link snapped back, not broken, but stronger. A surge of raw emotion flooded between them, so powerful it made Ethan gasp. He felt her fear, yes, but beneath it, he felt a wave of desire that was terrifying in its intensity. She wanted him. She wanted to curl into him, to hide in his strength, to taste the human chaos of him. She was curious about his lips, about the rough texture of his hands, about the way his mind felt like a warm fire in a cold winter. And she felt him. She felt his protective fury. She felt the way he looked at her, not as a princess or an alien, but as the most incredible thing he had ever seen. She felt his arousal, sharp and sudden, and his desperate, clawing struggle to shove it down because he didn't want to scare her. They pulled back, gasping, their eyes snapping open. They were inches apart. Ethan's hands had found their way to her waist, gripping the fabric of her coat. Lyra's fingers were tangled in his hair. Did it work? Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. No. Lyra breathed. Her pupils were blown wide, the galaxy spinning frantically. It reinforced. She didn't move away. She stared at his mouth. You are incredibly loud, Ethan. Your thoughts. I am sorry, Ethan stammered, his face burning. I am trying not to think about that. Why? Lyra asked. Her voice was genuinely curious, laced with that alien innocence that drove him crazy. Because, Ethan said, forcing himself to let go of her waist, though his hands shook. Because you are a princess from outer space, and I am a guy who fixes toilets. And because we are currently being hunted by a paramilitary death squad, and mostly because I do not want you to feel like you have to. Just because we are linked. Lyra tilted her head. She scanned his face, reading the truth in his micro-expressions. On my world, she said softly, mating is a contract. It is decided by lineage, by genetic optimization. There is no wanting. There is only duty. That sounds lonely, Ethan said. It is, she admitted. She leaned back in again, closing the distance he had tried to create. I can feel your respect, Ethan. It is a strange flavor. It tastes like iron and honey. You want me, but you are terrified of crossing my boundaries. Yeah. Well, consent is kind of a big deal here, Ethan said, at least for the good guys. Lyra smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. I find that I do not want you to be a good guy right now, she whispered. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Lyra, I am not compelled by the link. Ethan, the link just shows me the truth, and the truth is I have never chosen anything for myself. Not my job, not my name, not my life. She brushed her thumb over his lower lip. I want to choose this. I want to choose you. Even if it is just for a minute. Ethan stopped thinking. He stopped worrying about the death squads and the politics and the fact that she could probably kill him with her brain. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't like kissing a human. It was electric. A static shock jumped between their lips, making him jolt, but he didn't pull back. Her mouth was cool, then hot. And the link exploded, and it wasn't just physical sensation, it was a kaleidoscope of feeling. He felt her surprise, her delight, her sudden, overwhelming hunger. He tasted the violet ocean. She tasted the rain and the grit of the city. For a moment, they weren't two people. They were one loop of sensation, feeding into each other, amplifying, spiraling up and up. Then the door banged open. Ethan and Lyra sprang apart, scrambling to their feet. Drix stood in the doorway, his shotgun raised, his face grim. Hate to interrupt the honeymoon, he growled. But we have a problem. What is it? Ethan asked, wiping his mouth, his heart still racing like a trip hammer. Drix held up a small black device. It was blinking with a rapid red light. Found this under the table in the main room. It is a transponder. Someone activated it 5 minutes ago. A traitor? Lyra gasped. Drix nodded. One of my guys, or one of yours, does not matter now. A low thumping sound vibrated through the ceiling. Dust rained down. They are drilling, Ethan said, looking up. They are breaching, Drix corrected. The ceiling of the main chamber exploded inward. Debris rained down. Flashbang grenades dropped through the holes, detonating with blinding white flashes and deafening cracks. Screams erupted from the main room. Go! Drix roared, shoving them toward a hidden panel in the back wall. Take the drainage tunnel. It comes out at the rail yard. What about you? Ethan yelled. Drix racked the slide of his shotgun. I bought this place with blood. I am not letting them take it for free. Besides, I am too old to run. He turned and charged back into the main room, roaring a challenge as the first Helixstein troopers dropped from the ceiling on rappel lines. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. Come on. They dove into the narrow, dark tunnel behind the panel just as the room behind them filled with the staccato roar of automatic fire. They scrambled through the dark, pipes tearing at their clothes, the sound of the battle fading behind them but never truly stopping. Lyra stopped suddenly, gasping for breath. She leaned against the wet brick wall, clutching her chest. Ethan, she choked out. What? Are you hit? Ethan shined the light on her, checking for blood. No, she said, her eyes wide with horror. The code, the transponder Drix found. I saw the frequency modulation. What about it? It was not Keithar, she whispered. It was not Helixstein. She looked at him, and the betrayal in her eyes was worse than the fear. It was a Solarian encryption. My mother's house. Ethan stared at her. You mean? The traitor isn't just in the safe house, Lyra said, her voice breaking. The traitor is in my delegation. Someone on my own staff sold us out. A massive explosion rocked the tunnel, knocking them both off their feet. Dust billowed out from the direction of the safe house. The firing had stopped. They are dead, Ethan realized. Drix. The others. Lyra scrambled up, her face streaked with tears and dirt. We have to keep moving, she said, her voice hard, brittle as glass. We have to get to the relay. If I do not warn the assembly, if I do not expose them, then Drix died for nothing. She reached out and took Ethan's hand. Her grip was bruising. Run, she said, and they ran into the dark, leaving the ruins of their sanctuary behind them. The city limits of Neo-Viridia dissolved into a smear of gray concrete and industrial waste as the stolen transport hauler roared down the battered highway. The vehicle was a relic, a rusted brick of steel designed for moving construction waste, not outrunning corporate death squads, but it was heavy, anonymous, and crucially devoid of the modern tracking chips that infested every civilian car in the metropolis. Ethan gripped the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The rain had turned into a relentless sheet of water, hammering against the cracked windshield. Next to him, Lyra was doing something terrifying to the dashboard. She had ripped the plastic casing off the center console, exposing a nest of greasy wires. Her fingers, glowing with faint violet light from her wrist unit, were moving with blurred speed, reweaving the copper strands. What are you doing? Ethan shouted over the roar of the engine and the thunder outside. You are going to short out the battery. I am optimizing the fuel injection cycle, Lyra replied. Her tone calm despite the fact that they were doing 90 miles an hour in a 40 zone. The combustion efficiency of this engine is appalling. It wastes 30% of its energy as heat and noise. It is offensive to the laws of thermodynamics. It is a garbage truck. Lyra, Ethan yelled back. It is not supposed to be efficient. It is supposed to be loud. It is currently a getaway vehicle, she corrected. And if I do not bypass the governor chip, the Helixstein pursuit drones will catch us within 12 minutes. There. She pinched two wires together. A spark showered onto her lap, but she did not flinch. The engine note changed instantly. The low, grinding rumble vanished, replaced by a high-pitched, turbine-like whine. The hauler surged forward, slamming Ethan back into the torn vinyl seat. The speedometer needle buried itself past the maximum marker. Okay, Ethan gasped, straightening the wheel as the heavy tires fought for grip on the wet asphalt. That works. Just try not to blow us up. We have a 94% probability of reaching the perimeter checkpoint before catastrophic engine failure, Lyra said, wiping grease from her cheek. Great odds, Ethan muttered. I love those odds. They hit the first checkpoint 10 miles later. It was a chaotic bottleneck of rain-slicked barriers and flashing blue lights. Automated sentry turrets scanned license plates while bored human guards in ponchos waved flashlights at drivers. Ethan felt a cold spike of adrenaline. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the 2 ident cards Drix had forged before the raid. Put this on the dashboard, he told Lyra. Act bored. Bored? Lyra repeated, taking the card. I am currently experiencing elevated cortisol levels and a heart rate of 120 beats per minute. Yeah. Well, on the outside. You need to look like you hate your job and just want to go home, Ethan said. Slump your shoulders. Look at your phone. Do not make eye contact. Lyra mimicked his posture, slumping down in the seat and staring blankly at the dark screen of the console. It was a passable impression of a weary commuter. The guard approached, shining his beam into the cab. The light washed over Ethan's face. Then Lyra's. "Transport permit?" the guard asked, his voice muffled by the rain. Ethan tapped the card on the scanner. It beeped green. "Hauling scrap to the reclamation yards in Sector 9, Ethan said, injecting a note of exhaustion into his voice. "Boss wants it there by 6 or he docks my pay." The guard looked at Lyra. She did not look up. She was tapping her finger on her knee in a rhythmic, agitated pattern. "Who is she?" the guard asked. "My sister," Ethan lied smoothly. "Her ride broke down. I am dropping her off at the junction." The guard lingered for a second too long. His eyes narrowed, looking at the strange, precise geometry of Lyra's jawline. Ethan held his breath. He could feel Lyra gathering energy in her fingertips, ready to unleash a kinetic blast that would kill the guard instantly. "Do not," Ethan projected the thought as hard as he could. "Stay still." The guard sniffed, smelling the ozone coming from the exposed wires on the dashboard. "Fix your console, buddy," the guard grunted. "It is a fire hazard." He waved them through. Ethan exhaled a breath he felt he had been holding since he was born. As they accelerated away into the darkness, Lyra sat up, her perfect posture returning instantly. "Your ability to fabricate untruths under pressure is remarkable," she observed. "It is called lying. Lyra. Everyone does it. It is inefficient," she said, "but useful." They drove until the city was just a glowing haze in the rearview mirror. The landscape opened up into the desolate coastal scrublands, a dark expanse of wind-twisted trees and abandoned strip malls. Hunger hit them around midnight. Ethan pulled into a decrepit service station that looked like it had survived a war. The neon sign buzzed with the sound of a dying insect. "I will get supplies," Ethan said. "Stay in the truck. Hood up." He came back 5 minutes later with an armful of crinkling plastic packages. He dumped them onto Lyra's lap. "Dinner is served," he announced, tearing open a bag of spicy synthetic corn chips. Lyra picked up a package of neon orange crackers, examining the ingredients list with the scrutiny of a forensic pathologist. "Red dye number 40, she read. "Partially hydrogenated soy oil, monosodium glutamate." "Ethan, this is not food. This is a chemical weapon disguised as nutrition." "It is tasty," Ethan said, shoving a handful of chips into his mouth. "Try it." Lyra gingerly took a cracker. She sniffed it, then took a microscopic bite. She chewed slowly, her face a mask of intense concentration. "Well?" Ethan asked. "It activates the pleasure centers of the brain while simultaneously assaulting the liver," she concluded. "It is acceptable." She ate another one, then another. Within minutes, her fingers were stained orange, and they were fighting over the last bag of gummy bears. They argued about the map as the miles rolled by. Lyra insisted on calculating the trajectory based on stellar navigation, pointing out through the windshield that the North Star was 3 degrees off its true axis due to atmospheric refraction. Ethan insisted on following the road signs that said Route 66. "You are stubborn," Lyra said, crossing her arms. "I am practical," Ethan countered. "We are in a truck, Lyra. We have to follow the road. We cannot drive through the woods just because the stars say it is a shortcut. It is not a shortcut. It is a geodesic," she grumbled. But she let him drive. The storm grew worse as they moved inland. The rain became a torrent, blinding and heavy. The old truck was hydroplaning on every curve. "We need to stop," Ethan said, gripping the wheel as a gust of wind nearly shoved them into a ditch. The visibility is 0. He spotted a flickering sign for the Starlight Motel a few miles ahead. It was a grim collection of cabins rotting in the damp woods, but it had a roof. Ethan paid cash to a sleep-deprived clerk who didn't look up from his magazine. He got the key to room 4. It was a small room, smelling of mildew and pine cleaner. There was a single window, a bathroom with a cracked sink, and one bed. The mattress sagged in the middle like a hammock. "One bed," Ethan said, dropping his bag by the door. Of course, it is like the universe is writing a bad romance novel. Lyra stood in the center of the room, looking at the bed with trepidation. "I do not require sleep in the same frequency as humans," she said. "I can enter a meditative trance in the chair. Do not be ridiculous," Ethan said, kicking off his boots. "You have been running on adrenaline for 2 days. You need to crash. I will take the chair." They argued for 5 minutes until they reached a compromise. They would share the bed. Ethan would stay on the left, Lyra on the right, fully clothed, with the lumpy duvet acting as a demilitarized zone between them. The lights flickered and died as the storm knocked out the local grid. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the strobe light flashes of lightning through the thin curtains. They lay back to back. Ethan stared at the peeling wallpaper, his heart thudding against the mattress. He was exhausted, but his mind was wire-tight. He could feel Lyra behind him. Not just the physical pressure of her back against the mattress, but the humming, static presence of her mind. The link was wide open in the dark. He tried to block his thoughts, but stray images leaked through. He imagined turning over. He imagined the way her hair smelled like ozone. He imagined wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. "Stop it," he told himself. "She is a diplomat. You are a mechanic. Go to sleep." But he felt her response. It wasn't a word. It was a sensation, a flash of heat, a curiosity. Lyra was lying with her eyes open, watching the lightning shadows dance on the wall. She felt Ethan's desire, and it didn't disgust her. It terrified her because it echoed her own. She felt a phantom sensation of his lips on her neck, a thought he had suppressed but she had caught. Her breath hitched. Ethan heard it. "Are you okay?" he whispered into the dark. "Yes," she whispered back. Her voice was tight. "I am just processing." "Processing what?" "The inefficiency of this arrangement," she lied. "The thermal output of 2 bodies in close proximity is distracting." Ethan smiled in the dark. "Yeah, distracting." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. They were not touching, but the air between them felt solid, a bridge of tension that was both agonizing and sweet. Then the sky tore open. A crack of thunder, louder than anything before, shook the cabin. It sounded like an artillery shell impacting the roof. Lyra gasped. A sharp, strangled cry escaped her throat. Ethan felt a spike of pure, white-hot terror spear through his mind. It wasn't just fear of a storm. It was a memory. The sky burning, not lightning but plasma beams. Ships descending through clouds of smoke, the ground shaking as cities were turned to glass. The sound of screaming, thousands of voices silenced in a second. Ethan sat up, whirling around. Lyra was curled into a ball, her hands over her ears, shaking so hard the bed frame rattled. "Lyra?" Ethan said. She didn't answer. She was gasping for air, her eyes squeezed shut, lost in the flashback. Ethan moved without thinking. He crawled over the duvet and knelt beside her. He didn't touch her. He remembered how she had recoiled in the shaft. But he leaned close, putting his body between her and the window. "Lyra," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "It is just thunder. It is just a storm. You are on Earth. You are in a motel. You are safe. Another crack of thunder boomed. Lyra flinched as if she had been struck. They are firing, she whimpered. The orbital batteries, they are leveling the grid. No, Ethan said. No batteries, just rain. Listen to me. Listen to my voice. He reached out, hovering his hand over her shoulder. Can I touch you? He asked. She nodded. A jerky, desperate motion. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her up. She collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest. She was freezing cold, shivering violently. Ethan pulled the duvet up around them, cocooning them together. He held her tight, one hand rubbing circles on her back, the other cradling the back of her head. I have got you, he murmured into her hair. I have got you. I am not going anywhere. Slowly, the shaking subsided. The terror in the link began to fade, replaced by the steady, grounding rhythm of Ethan's heartbeat. Lyra took a deep, shuddering breath, inhaling the scent of him, cheap soap, engine grease, and warm skin. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. In the flashes of lightning, her eyes were luminous. The human disguise had thinned in her panic, and the violet galaxies were swirling in the dark. I am sorry, she whispered. It was a memory from the siege of Eris Prime. I was a child. You do not have to apologize, Ethan said softly. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. They were so close now. The heat between them was no longer just tension. It was a gravitational pull. Ethan looked at her lips. He felt the pull of the link, the overwhelming urge to close the gap. He leaned in. Lyra leaned in. Their breaths mingled, warm and moist. Ethan, she breathed, her eyes fluttering shut. He tilted his head. He was a millimeter away. He could feel the static charge of her skin against his lips. Then Lyra pulled back. She put a hand on his chest, stopping him. It was a gentle touch, but firm. No, she whispered. Ethan froze. He pulled back, his heart crashing. I am sorry, he stammered. I felt. You felt what I wanted, Lyra said, her voice trembling. I want this. Ethan, I want it so much it scares me. Then why? Because if I kiss you now, she said, tears shimmering in her eyes, I might choose you. Ethan frowned, confused. Choose me? Over my duty, she said. Over my people. Over everything. If we cross this line, the bond will solidify. I will not be able to be objective. I will burn down the galaxy to keep you safe. Ethan, and I do not know if I deserve to make that choice. I do not know if I have the right to be that selfish. Ethan looked at her. He saw the conflict tearing her apart, the diplomat fighting the woman, the alien fighting the human heart she was discovering. He took a deep breath and nodded. He covered her hand on his chest with his own. Okay, he whispered. Okay, she asked, surprised. I can wait, he said. I am not going to push you. Lyra, when you are ready, not a second before. Lyra looked at him with a wonder that broke his heart a little. You are remarkably stubborn, Ethan Vance. So I have been told. He lay back down, pulling her with him. This time, they didn't turn back to back. He lay on his back, and she curled into his side, resting her head on his shoulder. Go to sleep, he said. We have a universe to save in the morning. The storm broke before dawn, leaving the world washed clean and gray. They left the motel in silence, the intimacy of the night before hanging between them like a promise. They reached the coordinates Lyra had programmed just as the sun was cresting the horizon. It was a desolate patch of land, miles from the nearest town. In the center of a muddy field stood a colossal ruin. It was an old radio telescope, A massive dish of rusted steel pointed aimlessly at the sky. Vines choked the support struts, and graffiti covered the concrete base. "This is it?" Ethan asked, parking the truck in the tall grass. "It looks like a junk pile." "Camouflage," Lyra said. She hopped out of the truck and walked toward the base of the telescope. Ethan followed, carrying his toolkit, though he doubted a wrench would be much use here. Lyra stopped at a seemingly random section of the concrete foundation. She wiped away a layer of moss, revealing a smooth, dark metal plate beneath. She placed her hand on the plate. She closed her eyes, and her skin began to glow. The violet light flowed from her arm into the metal, tracing complex geometric patterns that flared to life under the rust. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the ground. Cinematic visuals unfolded as the ruin woke up. The rust seemed to become transparent, revealing shifting machinery of gold and glass beneath. The dish above them groaned, tilting smoothly to lock onto a specific point in the empty blue sky. Hidden panels in the concrete slid open. A console rose from the ground, bathed in hard light. Royal access code accepted. A synthetic voice boomed. "Welcome. Observer Lyra." Ethan stared, open-mouthed. "Okay," he said. "That is cooler than a wrench." Lyra stepped up to the console. Her fingers danced over the holographic interface. "I am aligning the transmitter with the Galactic Assembly Relay Network," she said. "The signal will bounce through the slipspace corridor. It will reach the High Council in real time." She typed in a command, her face grim. "I am attaching the evidence. The sensor logs from the facility, the recordings of the Helix Dine troops, the encrypted communications we intercepted at the safe house." She paused, her finger hovering over the execute key. "Do it," Ethan said gently. She pressed the key. A beam of invisible energy shot from the dish, punching a hole through the clouds as it raced toward the stars. "Message sent," Lyra whispered. Now we wait. They waited for 10 minutes. The wind rustled the grass. Ethan paced. Lyra stood like a statue. Then the console chimed. "Incoming transmission," the synthetic voice announced. "Priority 1. Origin. House Solari High Command." Lyra exhaled. "It is my mother," she said. A hologram materialized above the console. It wasn't the shadowy figure from before. It was a woman who looked like an older, more regal version of Lyra. She wore robes of shimmering white, and her eyes were hard as diamonds. "Lyra," the matriarch said. Her voice was cold. "You have violated protocol. You have abandoned your post." "Mother," Lyra said, stepping forward. "I have uncovered a conspiracy. House Cathar is conspiring with a human corporation to manufacture a pretext for invasion. They killed Drix. They tried to kill me." "We know," the matriarch said. Lyra froze. "You know?" "We have been aware of Cathar's maneuvers for cycles," the matriarch said dismissively. "It is a crude play, but effective." "Then why did you not stop it?" Lyra cried. "Why did you send me here if you knew?" "Because we needed to see if humanity would resist," the matriarch replied. "And they have failed. They are fracturing. They are selling their own kind for technology." "That is Helix Dine," Lyra argued. "Not humanity. The humans are innocent. They are weak," the matriarch stated. "Lyra, listen to me. The Assembly is tired of this squabble. Cathar has offered a trade route concession in exchange for stewardship of Earth. It is a favorable deal for House Solari." Lyra stared at the hologram, horror dawning on her face. "You are trading them?" she whispered. "You are trading an entire species for a trade route. Humanity is not worth the trouble." "Lyra, they are primitive, volatile. Let Cathar have them. Return home. We will overlook your..." Indiscretions with the native. Lyra took a step back, as if her mother had struck her. "I am not coming home," she said. "Do not be a child," the matriarch snapped. "The extraction team is already en route. Stand down." The hologram vanished. The silence that followed was absolute. Lyra stood staring at the empty air. Her shoulders slumped. The regal posture broke. She looked small, defeated, and utterly alone. "They knew," she whispered. "My mother knew. I was just a token. I was never the judge. I was just the excuse." She turned to Ethan. Her eyes were dull. The galaxies within them dimmed. "She is right," she said, her voice hollow. "You are not worth the trouble. I should just let you go." Ethan felt a surge of fury that was hot enough to melt steel. He walked up to her and grabbed her shoulders, spinning her around to face him. "Hey!" he shouted. "Look at me!" Lyra looked at him, tears spilling over. "Stop it. Ethan, it is over." "It is not over," Ethan said. "So your mom is a politician. Welcome to the club. We have plenty of those down here." "But that does not mean she is right. She is the matriarch." Lyra sobbed. "She decides the truth." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You do. You are the observer. Lyra, you saw us. You saw the mess. Yeah, but you saw the other stuff too. You saw Drix die for a stranger. You saw me." He shook her gently. "She said we are not worth the trouble. What do you say?" Lyra looked at him. She felt his fierce, burning belief in her. She felt the love he was trying to hide. She remembered the motel room, the laughter in the maintenance shaft. "I say she is wrong," Lyra whispered. Ethan grinned. It was a reckless, dangerous grin. "Good. Then let's prove it. If she won't fight for you, Lyra, I will. I will fight the whole damn galaxy if I have to." Lyra stared at him. The concept of chosen family slammed into her, the idea that loyalty wasn't about blood or houses or genetic contracts. It was about who stood next to you when the sky fell. "You are illogical," she said, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I am human," Ethan said. "It is our best feature." A sudden shriek tore through the air. Ethan and Lyra spun around. 3 black gunships crested the tree line, their engines screaming. They bore the markings of Helixdyne, but the soldiers hanging out the side doors were wearing the jagged, angular armor of House Kethar. "They found the signal," Lyra yelled. The ground around them erupted in geysers of dirt as plasma bolts raked the field. "Cover!" Ethan roared, tackling Lyra behind the concrete base of the telescope. The air turned into a storm of noise and heat. "Lyra, can you fight?" Ethan asked, shouting over the explosions. Lyra wiped her eyes. The sadness vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline anger. "Yes," she said. She stood up, peering around the concrete. She raised both hands. The violet light flared, brighter than ever before. She thrust her hands forward. A pulse of concussive force slammed into the lead gunship. It crumpled like a soda can, spinning out of control and crashing into the field in a ball of fire. "Nice shot!" Ethan yelled. He scrambled up the maintenance ladder of the telescope structure. "Where are you going?" Lyra shouted, firing another blast that vaporized a squad of soldiers charging through the grass. "I am going to bring the house down," Ethan yelled. He climbed to the gantry, 50 feet in the air. Below him, the firefight was a chaos of laser fire and alien energy. More soldiers were pouring out of the remaining ships. Ethan reached the hydraulic control box for the main dish. He didn't have tools, so he used his boot, kicking the cover off. He ripped out the safety governor and jammed the controls to full tilt. The massive steel dish groaned. It swung down rapidly, the metal screaming. Ethan jumped from the gantry, landing on a lower platform just as the dish slammed into the ground. crushing a Kethar transport tank and collapsing the walkway where a squad of Helix 9 snipers had set up. He slid down a support cable, landing next to Lyra. "Efficient?" he asked, panting. "Crude," she said, blasting a soldier who was aiming at his back. "But effective." They fought back to back, a whirlwind of human ingenuity and alien power, but there were too many of them. "We cannot hold them," Lyra said. Her light was flickering. She was running out of energy. Ethan looked at the console. A red light was blinking on the display. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra looked. Her face went pale. "It is a containment breach," she said. "The Kethar brought an evidence eraser. It is a singularity bomb. It creates a micro-black hole. It is meant to swallow the telescope and everything in it to hide the proof of their tech." "It is ticking," Ethan noted. "Run!" Lyra screamed. She grabbed his hand. They turned and sprinted toward the truck. Behind them, the bomb detonated. It wasn't an explosion. It was an implosion. A sphere of absolute darkness expanded from the base of the telescope. It swallowed the concrete, the metal, the screaming soldiers, and the grass. It ate the light itself. They reached the truck. Ethan threw himself into the driver's seat. Lyra dove in the passenger side. Ethan slammed the gas. The modified engine screamed. The truck peeled out, mud spraying. In the rearview mirror, the world was vanishing. The black sphere expanded, eating the telescope whole. The wind howled as the air was sucked into the void. "Go, go, go!" Lyra chanted. Ethan kept his foot to the floor. The back wheels lifted off the ground as the gravity wave hit them, but the momentum carried them forward. They crested the hill and slammed back down onto the road, skidding sideways. Ethan fought the wheel, correcting the slide. Behind them, the black sphere collapsed with a sound like a thunderclap, leaving nothing but a perfectly smooth, empty crater where the relay had been. Ethan slowed the truck, his chest heaving. "They are gone," he gasped. "The evidence, the relay, everything." Lyra looked back at the empty crater. "We are alone," she said. "No extraction, no backup, just us." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "Just us," he agreed. He looked at the road ahead. "Part 5, he muttered. "Time to do something crazy." The stolen transport truck idled in the middle of the empty highway, the engine making a sound like a box of rocks tumbling down a staircase. Behind them, the black void of the imploded radio telescope had vanished, leaving only a crater of smooth, glassed earth that smoked in the rain. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The adrenaline that had carried him through the firefight was crashing, replaced by a cold, trembling exhaustion. "They are gone," Ethan said, staring at the crater in the rearview mirror. "The evidence, the recordings, everything we needed to prove you are innocent. It is all gone." Lyra sat in the passenger seat. She was not trembling. She was perfectly terrifyingly still. She looked down at her wrist unit, which was blinking with a frantic crimson light. "Not everything," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I am the evidence, Ethan. My biometric logs, the neural traces of the link, the memories of what I saw. It is all stored in my cortex. If I can get to the assembly physically, I can testify." "To the assembly?" Ethan laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You mean the people in space? The ones currently parking a blockade fleet over my planet? How exactly are we going to get there? Do you have a spaceship hidden in the glove compartment?" "No," Lyra said. She began tapping a sequence into her wrist unit. Her movements were precise, final. "But I have a distress beacon. It is a royal emergency protocol. It overrides all local traffic control. It forces an immediate medical extraction for high-value targets." Ethan watched her fingers flying over the holographic keys. If you trigger that, he said slowly, they will know exactly where we are. Yes, and they will pick us up. They will beam us directly to the flagship, the Star of Solari. It is currently anchored in low orbit, acting as the diplomatic hub. Ethan looked out the windshield at the gray, weeping sky. So we are turning ourselves in. We are crashing the party, Lyra corrected. She looked at him, and for a second, the regal mask slipped. Her eyes were wide, swirling with fear and a desperate, reckless hope. I cannot do this alone. Ethan, if I go up there by myself, they will silence me before I can speak. I need you. Me? Ethan asked. I am just a mechanic. You are the witness, she said. And you are my anchor. Without you, I am just a politician. With you, I am me. She held out her hand, ready to see the stars. Ethan? Ethan looked at her hand. It was slender, pale, and alien. He thought about his apartment. He thought about Marcus and the bad coffee and the safe, boring life he had left behind. He took her hand. Beam me up, he said. Lyra pressed the final key. The world did not dissolve. It shattered. There was a sound like a thunderclap inside Ethan's skull. The truck, the rain, the smell of wet asphalt. It was all ripped away in a violent upward shear of white light. He felt his body being pulled apart, atom by atom, unspooled like a thread and fired through the eye of a needle. It was not painful, but it was wrong. It was a sensation of absolute unbeing. Then, just as suddenly, reality snapped back together. Ethan slammed into a hard, polished floor. He fell to his hands and knees, retching dryly, his inner ear screaming in confusion. Gravity was wrong here. It was lighter, maybe 90% of Earth standard. The air smelled sterile, crisp, and charged with ozone, like the air after a lightning strike but magnified 1,000 times. Stand up, human, a voice boomed. Ethan wiped his mouth and staggered to his feet. He was standing in a cathedral of light. The walls were not metal. They were transparent crystal. Soaring upward to a vaulted ceiling that seemed to be made of starlight itself. Through the floor, which was also terrifyingly transparent, he could see the curve of the earth, a vast blue and white marble hanging in the black velvet of space. They were surrounded. A dozen towering figures stood in a circle around them. They were armored in white ceramic plate that gleamed like pearl. They held long, elegant staves that hummed with contained energy. Their faces were hidden behind featureless masks. Beside him, Lyra stood up. She did not stagger. She rose fluidly, smoothing her torn, dirty lab coat as if it were a royal gown. She lifted her chin, her spine straightening, her entire demeanor shifting from the fugitive researcher to something ancient and commanding. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin flared bright gold. Her eyes, no longer hiding behind contacts, burned with the light of the violet nebula. I am Lyra of House Solari, daughter of the second sun, observer of the third ring, she announced. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber, amplified by the acoustics of the crystal. And I demand audience with the High Council. The guards did not lower their weapons. One of them stepped forward. He was taller than the rest, his armor edged in gold. You are a fugitive, observer, the guard stated. His voice was synthesized, harsh. You are accused of treason, of contamination. I am accused by liars, Lyra said coldly. Take me to my mother. Now. The guard hesitated. He looked at Lyra, then at Ethan. And the specimen? The guard asked, pointing his staff at Ethan's chest. Ethan flinched as the tip of the staff glowed red. He is not a specimen, Lyra said, stepping between Ethan and the weapon. He is my bondmate. A ripple of shock went through the guards. They lowered their weapons slightly, exchanging glances. Bondmate, it was a sacred word. Bring them, a new voice commanded. The circle of guards parted. At the far end of the chamber, raised on a dais of floating obsidian platforms, sat the High Council. There were 5 of them, seated on thrones of woven light, but Ethan only saw one. In the center sat a woman who could only be the matriarch. She was immense, not in size, but in presence. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow. Her robes flowed around her like liquid mercury. She did not wear a crown. The air around her head simply shimmered with a corona of psionic power. Lyra walked forward, pulling Ethan with her. The sound of their footsteps was swallowed by the silence of the room. "Mother," Lyra said, stopping at the foot of the dais. Matriarch Alara looked down. Her face was unreadable, carved from ice. "You look terrible." "Lyra," the matriarch said, "you are covered in mud. You smell of hydrocarbons, and you are holding hands with a primitive." Ethan instinctively tried to let go, but Lyra squeezed his hand harder, anchoring him. "His name is Ethan," Lyra said, "and he saved my life." "He is a contaminant," the matriarch replied, waving a hand dismissively. "Guards, take the human to the decontamination sector. Incinerate his clothing and scan him for pathogens." "No!" Lyra shouted. The sound cracked the perfect composure of the room. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You will not touch him. You want a report? Here is the report. Helix Dine and House Keither have fabricated the crisis. They are orchestrating false flag attacks to justify an occupation. And you knew." The matriarch did not blink. "We discussed this via transmission. Lyra, politics is the art of the possible. Earth is unstable. Kethar offers order. Kethar offers slavery." Lyra screamed, "And you are letting them do it because you are afraid of a trade war." "Enough!" The matriarch stood up. The air pressure in the room dropped instantly. Ethan felt his ears pop. A wave of psychic force rolled off the dais, forcing him to his knees. Lyra staggered but remained standing. "You speak of things you do not understand." "Child," the matriarch said, her voice booming like thunder. "The Galactic Assembly hangs by a thread. If we oppose Keithar openly, we risk a civil war that will burn a dozen systems. Is one mudball planet worth that? Is the freedom of these short-lived, violent creatures worth the lives of billions of our own kind?" She pointed a long, white finger at Ethan. "Look at him. He is afraid. He is small. His species has barely mastered the atom, and they immediately used it to build bombs. They are not partners. Lyra, they are a liability." Ethan looked up. He saw the faces of the other council members. They looked bored, impatient. One of them, a creature with faceted eyes like a fly, was checking a data pad. They didn't care. To them, Earth was just a line item on a budget, a problem to be solved with red ink. Ethan felt a surge of anger, not the hot, flashy anger of a fight, but the cold, stubborn anger of a man who has been told he doesn't matter his entire life. He stood up. He had to push against the psychic weight of the matriarch, fighting the gravity of her will. But he stood up. "We are not a liability," Ethan said. The silence in the room was absolute. The matriarch looked at him as if a chair had started talking. "You have no voice here. Human," she said. "Maybe not," Ethan said, his voice shaking but gaining strength. "But I have eyes, and I have seen what you people are doing. You talk about us like we are animals, like we are just stuff." He stepped forward, standing next to Lyra. "You say we are violent?" "Yeah, we are. We fight, we mess up, but we also fix things. I am a paramedic. I spend my nights pulling people out of wrecked cars. I watch strangers hold hands while they bleed out. I watch people run into burning buildings to save cats. For God's sake. He looked around the room, meeting the alien gazes. We try. That is what makes us worth it. We try to be better. And if you cannot see that, then you are the ones who are blind, eloquent, but irrelevant, the matriarch said coldly. Words are wind, human. We deal in data, and the data says you are dangerous. Then look at the data, Ethan challenged. He turned to Lyra. Show them, he whispered. Lyra looked at him, confused. Show them what? Everything, Ethan said. The link. Use the link. Don't just tell them. Make them feel it. Lyra hesitated. Ethan, if I open the link that wide, they will see everything. Not just the memories. They will see us. They will see us. I do not care, Ethan said, gripping her hand. Let them see. Lyra looked into his eyes. She saw the trust there, the absolute, unshakable faith. She nodded. She turned to the assembly. She closed her eyes. She raised her hands, palms outward. Witness, she whispered. She dropped the mental shields, all of them. It was not a beam of light. It was a shock wave. Ethan felt his mind being turned inside out. The neural link, which had been a private thread between them, suddenly expanded into a roaring river. It flowed out of Lyra, amplified by her royal biology, and washed over the entire chamber. The council members gasped, clutching their heads. They didn't just see the images, they lived them. They felt the heat of a fire in a tenement building. They felt the smoke in Ethan's lungs. They felt the weight of a stranger's body in his arms as he carried them down the stairs. They felt the pure, selfless drive to save a life, not for reward, but because it was a life. They felt the loneliness of a rainy night in the city, the taste of bad coffee shared with a friend, the quiet dignity of fixing a broken heater so an old lady wouldn't freeze. And then, the images shifted. They felt the moment Ethan first saw Lyra, the awe, the confusion, the sudden bolt of lightning attraction. They felt the fear in the maintenance shaft, the comfort of his arm around her in the motel, the struggle to not kiss her, the agonizing, beautiful restraint of respecting her choice. The privacy of their hearts was torn open. Ethan felt his face burning. Every secret fantasy, every insecurity, every moment of longing he had suppressed, it was all out there. The council felt his desire for her, raw and undeniable. They felt how much he loved the way she frowned when she was thinking. They felt his terror that he wasn't good enough for her. And they felt Lyra's side. Ethan gasped as he felt it too, fully for the first time. He felt her adoration. It was immense. She didn't just like him, she saw him as a miracle. She loved his messiness, his humor, his stubborn, fragile humanity. He felt her jealousy, a sharp, hot spike, at the thought of him ever looking at a human woman. He felt her desperate wish to run away with him, to leave the stars behind and just live in a small apartment with a window that opened. The emotional storm swirled through the crystal chamber, overwhelming the cold logic of the aliens. The matriarch sat on her throne, her eyes wide, her hand pressed to her chest. She was feeling the one thing she had forgotten centuries ago, the terrifying vulnerability of love. It was unbearable. It was too much intimacy. Ethan felt like he was naked, skinless, exposed to the galaxy. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run. I am here, Lyra's voice whispered in his mind. It was the only solid thing in the hurricane. I am here. I am choosing you. Let them look. I am proud of us. The projection crested, a wave of pure emotion, and then crashed into silence. Lyra lowered her hands. She was panting, sweat glistening on her forehead. Ethan was shaking, leaning against her for support. The council sat in stunned silence. The matriarch looked pale. For a long moment, no one moved. The air still vibrated with the echoes of their shared heartbeats. Then a slow clapping broke the silence. It came from the side of the dais. A tall, slender alien with skin like polished obsidian stood up. He wore the dark purple robes of the High Justicar. "Remarkable," the Justicar said. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. Truly remarkable theater. This was High Counselor Xylos. He walked to the center of the dais, looking down at Ethan with a mixture of disgust and fascination. "We have heard rumors of such anomalies," Xylos said, addressing the assembly. "But to see it in person, it is terrifying." "Terrifying?" Lyra demanded, her voice hoarse. "It was the truth." "It was a weapon," Xylos countered sharply. He turned to the matriarch. "My lady, do you not see? This human is not a partner. He is a parasite. Look at how he manipulated your daughter's mind. Look at how he projected his primitive emotions onto this august body." He gestured at Ethan. "He is a weaponized empath," Xylos declared, "a biological anomaly created to disrupt the logical processes of superior species. He has infected observer Lyra. He has compromised her judgment with these chemical spikes." Murmurs broke out among the council. The awe was turning to suspicion. The fear of the unknown was taking root. It was a biological merge. Lyra argued. "It was accidental, was it?" Xylos asked smoothly. "Or was it a trap? Humans are deceptive. They are desperate. Perhaps he targeted you. Perhaps he wanted to enslave a royal observer to bypass our defenses." "That is a lie," Ethan shouted. "Is it?" Xylos sneered. "Can you deny that you influenced her? Can you deny that your biological imperatives have overridden her logic? Look at her. She is ready to commit treason for you." The matriarch looked at Lyra. She saw the defiance in her daughter's eyes. She saw the way Lyra stood in front of the human, shielding him. The matriarch's face hardened. The moment of empathy was gone, replaced by the cold calculus of the ruler. "Counselor Xylos raises a valid point," the matriarch said. "The risk of contamination is too high. If humans can compromise our operatives this easily, they are a threat to the stability of the assembly." She raised her hand. "I move for the permanent quarantine of the Sol system. Earth will be placed under a Type 1 blockade. No contact, no travel." "And the human?" Xylos asked. The matriarch looked at Ethan. "He cannot be allowed to return with knowledge of the assembly, and he cannot remain here." She reached into her robes and pulled out a small device. It looked like a multifaceted gemstone, pulsing with a harsh, white light. "The Mnemosyne prism," Lyra whispered, her blood running cold. "Bring him here," the matriarch commanded. Two guards seized Ethan's arms. He struggled, but their grip was like iron. They dragged him to the foot of the dais. "Lyra," the matriarch said, holding out the device, "you have a choice." Lyra stared at the prism. "What choice?" she choked out. "You can prove your loyalty to your house," the matriarch said. "Sever the bond. Use the prism on the human." "What will it do?" Ethan asked, looking at the glowing stone. "It will unravel the neural knot," the matriarch said. "It will wipe his memory of you. It will wipe his memory of this place. It will wipe the feelings that have been artificially induced." "It will wipe everything?" Lyra asked, tears streaming down her face. "He will be returned to his city," the matriarch said. "He will live out his small, safe life. He will not remember the stars. And you? You will be reinstated. You will be safe." "And if I refuse?" Lyra asked. "Then he will be designated a hostile combatant." Xylos interjected with a cruel smile. And he will be ejected from the airlock. Immediately. Lyra gasped. You cannot. It is the law, Xylos said. Unauthorized contact with a hostile species. The penalty is death, unless the contact is erased. Lyra looked at Ethan. The guards were holding him tight. Behind him, the vast blackness of space waited. She looked at the device in her mother's hand. To save him. She had to destroy him. She had to erase the only thing that mattered to her. She had to take away the memories of the maintenance shaft, the motel, the kiss. She took the device. It felt heavy and cold like a piece of dead star. She walked up to Ethan. He was not fighting the guards anymore. He was looking at her. Ethan, she whispered. I heard, he said. His voice was calm. Surprisingly calm. I cannot let them kill you, she said. I have to do it. I know, Ethan said. He looked at the device, then up into her eyes. Lyra, listen to me. He leaned in as far as the guards would let him. You do whatever you have to do to stay safe, okay? That was the deal. I am not leaving you to get dissected, and you are not letting me get spaced, but you will forget me, she sobbed. You will forget us. Ethan smiled. It was a sad, crooked smile. Maybe, he said. But I think I will still know. Somewhere in there, you do not just forget a galaxy. Lyra. He closed his eyes. Do it, he whispered. Be the princess. Save the world. Lyra stood there, the prism humming in her hand. She felt his love through the link, steady and brave and heartbreakingly human. He was sacrificing himself, his mind, his heart, so she wouldn't have to watch him die. She looked at the council. She looked at her mother. She looked at the smug face of Xylos. She made her choice. She raised the device. She did not aim it at Ethan's head. She aimed it at her own chest. What are you doing? The matriarch shouted, standing up. If the bond is the problem, Lyra said, her voice shaking but loud, then I will break it from my end. But I am not wiping him. She adjusted the setting on the prism, twisting the bezel to maximum overload. I refuse to live in a universe where this is an error, she declared. She pressed the device against her own heart. Lyra, no! Ethan screamed. She pulled the trigger. The prism exploded, not with fire, but with a blinding psychic scream of white light that shattered the crystal floor beneath them and plunged the entire chamber into chaos. The blinding white light that had filled the crystal chamber did not bring death. It brought silence. Ethan was on his knees, his hands thrown up to shield his face, expecting the heat of an explosion or the sickening unraveling of his own mind. But the heat never came. Instead, there was a sharp, high-pitched chime, like a wine glass shattering at a pitch too high for the human ear to fully process. He lowered his hands, blinking spots from his vision. Lyra was still standing. She was trembling, her chest heaving, smoke curling from the scorched fabric of her tunic. In her hand, she held the ruins of the Mnemosyne prism. The gemstone, once a pulsing heart of white light, was now a handful of gray, inert dust sifting through her fingers to the floor. She had not turned the weapon on her mind. She had fed the device a recursive logic loop, a command to erase itself, and overloaded the matrix with the sheer, raw force of her own bioelectric will. She dropped the remaining fragments. They clattered on the floor like common gravel. I refuse, Lyra said. Her voice was not loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the High Council chamber. It struck like a hammer. I refuse to accept that my love is a glitch, she continued, looking up at the dais where the matriarch sat frozen. I refuse to accept that truth is a contagion. If the law requires me to destroy the best part of myself to serve this assembly, then the law is broken. Not me. Ethan scrambled to his feet. He rushed to her side, grabbing her arm to steady her. She felt hot to the touch. Her energy reserves drained, but her eyes were burning with a fierce, defiant clarity. "You are insane," Ethan whispered, a frantic grin breaking through his terror. "You are absolutely insane. I learned it from you," she whispered back, leaning her weight against him. On the dais, High Counselor Xylos stood up, his obsidian face twisting in fury. "She has destroyed a relic of the High Court," he roared, pointing a trembling finger. "This is open rebellion. Guards, seize them, execute the human. Restrain the traitor." The white-armored guards stepped forward, their staves humming to life. Ethan tensed, shifting his stance to put himself between the weapons and Lyra, though he knew it was a futile gesture. "Halt!" The command did not come from the matriarch. It came from the lower tier of the seating area. A young delegate, a creature with iridescent scales and a slender bird-like frame, had stepped onto the floor. It was a representative of a minor system, usually silent during these proceedings. "I will not permit this," the delegate said, their voice vibrating with a strange, harmonic trill. Xylos stared down, incredulous. "You will not permit it? You are a junior scion of the Third Reach. You have no authority here." "I have the authority of a witness," the delegate retorted. "We all felt it, Xylos. When the observer opened the link, we felt the truth. We felt their fear. We felt their loyalty. And we felt the deception of those who sent them to die." Another delegate stood up, a massive rock-skinned being from the orbital mining guilds. "The bird is right," the rock being rumbled. "The observer showed us memories of a conspiracy. She showed us agents of House Kethar firing on a diplomatic outpost. Since when do we execute witnesses before investigating the crime?" One by one, they stood. The younger generation of the assembly, those who had grown tired of the stagnation and the secret deals, rose from their seats. A murmur of agreement swept through the hall, growing into a chant. "Evidence! Evidence! Evidence!" The matriarch sat on her throne, watching the tide turn. She looked at Xylos, who was frantically tapping his datapad, trying to summon security reinforcements that were not coming. Then she looked at Lyra, her daughter, who stood bruised and defiant, holding the hand of a primitive human mechanic. For the first time in centuries, the matriarch felt a flicker of something resembling pride. She raised her hand. The gesture was small, but it commanded absolute silence. "Stand down," she ordered the guards. "But my lady," Xylos protested, The law exists to serve the assembly, not to blind it." The matriarch cut him off. She stood up, her mercury robes flowing around her like water. "There is a motion on the floor for a transparent investigation." She looked directly at Xylos. "And we will begin by reviewing the transmission logs of House Kethar." Xylos went still. "This session is recessed," the matriarch declared. "Observer Lyra and the human, Ethan Vance, will be placed under protective custody in the royal wing. Anyone attempting to harm them will answer to me." She turned and swept out of the chamber, leaving the High Counselor standing alone in the spotlight, looking very small and very afraid. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity that changed the course of history for two species. Ethan and Lyra were not put in a cell. They were given a suite of rooms in the upper spire of the station, with a view of the earth that made Ethan dizzy every time he looked out the window. They were not alone, however. Teams of forensic slicers and data archivists descended on them. Lyra sat for hours, allowing them to interface with her wrist unit and the black box recorder embedded in her neural cortex. because she was the evidence. Every conversation she had recorded, every sensor sweep from the facility, every encrypted burst of static that Drix had intercepted in the safe house, it was all there, stored in the crystalline matrix of her suit's memory buffer. The trial of House Kethar was swift and brutal. When the logs were decrypted, they didn't just show a few rogue agents. They showed a systematic plan, funded by Helix Dyne and orchestrated by High Counselor Xylos, to frame humanity for a biological attack on a Solari outpost. The plan was to detonate a dirty bomb in New York and blame it on an alien terrorist cell, justifying a peacekeeping occupation that would have turned Earth into a strip mining colony. The revelation shattered the Assembly's deadlock. Ethan watched the final vote from a balcony overlooking the main chamber. The resolution passed with a 70% majority. Resolution 49 Alpha. The planet Earth is hereby designated a protected developing world. All hostile blockades are to be lifted immediately. A path toward associate membership will be established, subject to a 10-year monitoring period. It wasn't total freedom. There were still rules, there were still conditions, but there were no invasion fleets, no slave collars. "We did it," Lyra whispered, standing beside him. She was wearing a fresh tunic, clean and white, but she had refused to cover the faint lightning-shaped scar on her chest where the prism had exploded against her skin. "Yeah," Ethan said, leaning on the railing. "We did. Though I think I am technically unemployed now. I do not think Helix Dyne is going to take me back after I help dissolve their board of directors." Lyra smiled, and it was the first time in days that the smile reached her eyes. "I suspect we can find you a new position," she said. The summons to the matriarch's private sanctum came an hour later. The room was a garden, not a holographic projection, but a real garden, grown in the center of a space station. There were trees with silver bark and leaves that chimed like bells in the artificial breeze. A stream of water flowed uphill, defying gravity, to feed a pool of luminescent lotus flowers. The matriarch was waiting for them by the pool. She looked different without the high collar and the ceremonial headdress. She looked older, tired. "Leave us," she told her guards. When they were alone, she turned to Lyra. "You have caused a great deal of trouble, daughter." "I have caused justice," Lyra replied evenly. The matriarch sighed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. Justice is often just trouble with a better name. But you were correct. Xylos was a rot in the Foundation. He has been stripped of his rank and exiled to the Outer Rim. She turned her gaze to Ethan. It was heavy, like standing under a spotlight, but the malice was gone. "And you," she said, "the human who refuses to be silent." I answered to Ethan. "Ma'am," he said. "Ethan," the matriarch repeated, testing the name. "You have surprised me. I calculated that you would break under the pressure of the chamber. I calculated that your primitive mind would collapse when exposed to the full spectrum of our psychic projection." "I am pretty stubborn," Ethan said. "Indeed. It seems I underestimated the resilience of your species, and I underestimated the depth of my daughter's judgment." She walked over to a tree and plucked a silver leaf, twirling it in her fingers. "I cannot give you my blessing," she said quietly. "Our worlds are too different. The biology, the lifespan, the culture. The friction will be immense. You will face prejudice from my people and fear from yours. It will not be an easy path." "I never asked for easy," Lyra said. "I asked for him." The matriarch looked at Lyra, and for a moment, the mask slipped entirely, revealing a mother who was terrified for her child. "Then so be it," she said. She turned back to Ethan. I am granting you the status of consort designate. It is a diplomatic rank. It gives you immunity from prosecution in assembly space and the right to travel with the Observer Corps. It does not make you a citizen, but it means no one is allowed to disintegrate you without filling out 300 pages of paperwork first. I appreciate the paperwork, Ethan said. Do not make me regret this. Human, she said sharply. If you hurt her, there is no paperwork in the galaxy that will save you. I would die before I hurt her, Ethan said. And he meant it. The matriarch nodded. Once. Go. The shuttle is prepared. You have a planet to reassure. They didn't go to the shuttle immediately. They found a quiet spot in the upper arboretum, a secluded bench overlooking the star-spangled curve of the earth below. The silence between them was different now. It wasn't heavy with fear or charged with adrenaline. It was the comfortable, warm silence of two people who had run a marathon and finally crossed the finish line. Ethan sat back, stretching his legs. So, he said, consort designate. Does that come with a hat? I believe there is a sash, Lyra teased, sitting close to him. It is very scratchy. You will hate it. They laughed, the sound bubbling up easily. Then, the laughter faded, replaced by a gentle gravity. Ethan turned to look at her. He reached out and touched the scar on her chest, his fingers brushing the fabric of her tunic. You almost died, he said softly. With the prism, you were ready to erase yourself. I was ready to protect the truth, she said. She covered his hand with hers. You know, Ethan, on my world, we are taught that love is a strategic alliance, a merging of assets. But you showed me that it is a choice you have to make every day, even when it is terrifying, especially when it is terrifying. I was pretty terrified, Ethan admitted. Standing in front of those giant space wizards? I almost passed out. But you stood up, Lyra said. That is the point. Power without compassion is just violence. That is what Xylos had. That is what my mother had, for a long time. But you have the strength to be kind when you are afraid. That is rare. Ethan, in any species. Ethan looked at her. He saw the alien contours of her face, the way the light caught the gold patterns on her skin. She was so different from him, yet she was the most familiar thing in the universe. We are going to have to figure this out. You know, he said, the whole species thing. I eat hamburgers. You drink nutrient paste. I like loud music. You like silence. We can blend, Lyra said. Identities do not have to be erased to be shared. We can make something new. She leaned in close. The neural link, which had been buzzing with the chaotic noise of the trial, suddenly settled. It shifted into a hum, a steady, harmonious resonance that felt like coming home. Ethan felt her mind open to him. Not a blast of data, but a warm invitation. He leaned in to meet her. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back. When their lips touched, it wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a merging. Ethan felt the kiss, soft and trembling, but he also felt her joy. He felt the taste of starlight on her tongue. He felt the relief of a burden finally set down, and Lyra felt him. The rough warmth of his hands, the steady thump of his heart, the overwhelming gratitude that he was there, holding her. It was slow, deep, and infinite. It was a conversation without words, a promise made in the space between heartbeats. They broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting together. Wow, Ethan whispered. Adequate? Lyra asked, her eyes dancing. Ethan laughed, breathless. I think I am going to need a manual, he said. a galactic orientation manual for dating alien royalty. Chapter 1. How not to cause an interplanetary incident while kissing. Lyra smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with her thumb. I will supervise your training personally, she whispered. We can start with Chapter 2 immediately if you like, Ethan grinned. I am a fast learner. The shuttle ride down was smooth, no fleeing, no hiding, just a dignified descent authorized by the High Council. But the work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the world changed. It didn't change overnight. Old fears die hard, and there were plenty of politicians screaming about alien invaders. But the tide had turned. The exposure of Helixdyne's corruption led to mass arrests. The corporate stranglehold on the city began to loosen, and slowly, carefully, the sky began to open up. Lyra couldn't stay on Earth full-time. Her duty as an observer, now a senior ambassador, required her to be on the station, negotiating the terms of Earth's transition. And Ethan found that he couldn't just go back to fixing air conditioners. They made a plan. Lyra would split her cycles, 2 weeks on the station, 2 weeks on Earth. And Ethan accepted a job offer from the newly formed United Nations Office of Extraterrestrial Affairs. They needed someone who could talk to aliens without fainting, someone who understood that a growl might mean hello and that silence didn't always mean anger. He became a bridge, a translator not of language but of intent. 6 months later, the autumn wind blew leaves across the plaza of Sector 4. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp and clean. Ethan walked through the city, his hands in his pockets. It looked the same, but it felt different. The neon signs were still there, but now, mixed in with the advertisements for synthetic pets, there were public service announcements about cultural exchange programs. He passed a construction site. A team of human workers was repairing a collapsed aqueduct, working alongside a massive four-armed crook laborer in an exosuit. They weren't hugging, but they were sharing a lunch break. A human guy was offering the alien a sandwich. The alien was inspecting it with suspicion. Ethan smiled. It was a start. He walked to the edge of the old commercial district, near the entrance to the subway tunnels. There was a small park there now. In the center stood a simple stone monument. It didn't have a statue. Just a list of names carved into the granite, in memory of those who held the door. Drix, Kyle, Mara. Ethan stood in front of the stone. He placed a small metal cog, a piece of a transit relay, on the base of the monument. We made it. Drix, he whispered. You were right. They are just people, even the ones with tentacles. A ripple of energy passed through the air behind him. Ethan didn't turn around. He smiled. He felt the pressure shift, the familiar warmth blooming in the back of his mind. You are late, he said. I was detained by the customs authority, a voice replied, melodic, precise, and laced with amusement. Apparently, carrying a quantum lattice generator in a handbag is a violation of local ordinances. Ethan turned. Lyra stood there. She was wearing a long trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat, a classic attempt at human disguise that made her look like a spy from an old movie. But she wasn't hiding the way she used to. She wasn't hunching her shoulders. She wasn't dimming her light. Under the brim of the hat, her eyes were violet. And when she saw him, her face lit up with a radiance that made the passers-by stop and stare. A group of children playing near the fountain stopped their game. They looked at the tall woman in the coat. Is that her? One of them whispered. The Star Lady? Lyra looked down at them. She didn't retreat. She didn't engage her camouflage. She pulled her hand out of her pocket and held it out. A tiny, harmless arc of golden light danced between her fingers, spinning into the shape of a miniature galaxy. The children gasped, not in fear, in wonder. "Cool," one of the kids breathed. Lyra winked at them, a gesture Ethan had taught her, and walked toward him. Ethan met her halfway. "You are showing off," he teased. "I am engaging in community outreach," she corrected, looping her arm through his. They walked together out of the plaza, heading toward the coastline where the ocean met the sky. Ethan looked at his hand, intertwined with hers. He remembered the first time he had touched her in the maintenance shaft. The shock, the terror, the feeling that his reality was shattering. He had been right. His reality had shattered. But what had been built in its place was bigger, stranger, and infinitely more beautiful. He squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, and through the link, he felt a pulse of pure, unadulterated happiness. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked, leaning her head on his shoulder as they walked. Ethan looked up at the twilight sky, where the first stars were beginning to poke through the fading blue. "I was thinking," he said, "that I used to be afraid of what was out there. I used to think the universe was cold and dark and full of things that wanted to hurt us. And now," Ethan said, pulling her closer, "I know that if you touch it, if you really reach out and touch it, it glows." Lyra laughed, the sound bright and clear in the evening air. "That is scientifically inaccurate, Ethan, but poetically acceptable." They walked on into the darkening city, two specks of light in a vast galaxy, ready to rewrite the rules of the universe, one heartbeat at a time.